Hello and welcome to My Baseball History. I'm your host, Dan Wallach. My Baseball History is a long-form interview podcast where each episode I'll talk to someone new who has some sort of association to the game of baseball. No matter who I talk to, we'll talk about how they fell in love with baseball, how their career started, and how they got to be where they are today. On today's episode, I spoke with former Negro League baseball player Sam Allen. Sam was born in Norfolk, Virginia and went to Booker T. Washington High School, where he starred on the baseball team and the football team. By the time he was 16, he was playing semi-pro baseball as a member of the Norfolk Eagles. After he graduated, he tried out for the Cincinnati Reds at their spring training in Tampa, Florida. In 1957, Sam was a member of the Kansas City Monarchs, leading the Negro American League in runs scored while helping the Monarchs win their last championship. In 1958, he played for the Raleigh Tigers and in 1959 for the Memphis Red Sox. Sam was drafted into the U.S. Army in 1960, spending time as a member of the 82nd Airborne Division at Fort Bragg in North Carolina. When he returned to Norfolk after his military service, Sam continued playing baseball in and around town recreationally. He coached baseball and football for 5 years, he worked as a longshoreman for 6 years, he owned a carpet store for 5 years, and then worked as a tile setter. No matter what Sam was doing, though, he always took pride in doing it well. In 2003, Sam was elected to the Hampton Roads African American Sports Hall of Fame, and in 2006 he became a Wall of Fame inductee for the Yesterday's Negro League Baseball Players Foundation. Sam has been a distinguished guest at the Library of Congress and was a White House honoree in 2007. Sam was also a 2019 inductee of the Tidewater Baseball Shrine at Harbor Park in his hometown of Norfolk, Virginia. He was presented with the 2020 Lifetime Achievement Award from the Berkeley Historical Society, and in 2021 he received a phone call from Major League Baseball to invite him and a guest on an all-expenses-paid trip to the All-Star Game, an offer which is a lifetime invitation. He had previously received a lifetime pass from Major League Baseball to attend any game in the country. Sam has been instrumental in commemorating and remembering the achievements of Negro League players, and continues to appear at baseball card shows and at speaking engagements to teach his audience about the history and importance of black baseball in America. In this episode, we cover lots of ground. Sam tells us from his own personal experience what it was like to play with and against players like Willie Mays and Satchel Paige. We find out what made Ebbets Field such a special place to play. We learn what it was like to be a Negro Leaguer during the 1950s, and everything that came with life on the road for a black baseball player in America back then. And we hear how modern players like CeCe Sabathia treat Sam like the royalty that he is. After all, he was a Monarch. With all of that information and much, much more coming at you, it may be helpful to follow along with the episode's liner notes on our podcast website. You'll still be able to enjoy the interview without the extra help, but sometimes when I'm listening to things like this, I like to really go in depth. So I've provided some photos and links to give you a better understanding of the things Sam and I are discussing. Those liner notes can be found on the My Baseball History website, which is online at www.shoelesspodcast.com. If you want to follow along, head to the website where you'll see the Sam Allen episode listed first on the main page under Latest Episodes. Click on that and you'll be ready to follow along. There's an embedded media player right on the page, so you don't need to have multiple windows open while you listen or fumble around with multiple devices. If you want to catch up on any of our previous episodes, you can click on the tabs at the top of the website to go back through past episodes from any of the 3 seasons to date and see a full list of everything we have to offer so far. Everything in the liner notes goes in chronological order of how we talked about them in the interview, so you should easily be able to keep your place as you listen. After the interview, we'll do a recap of what you just heard, adding some extra insight and hopefully answering any questions that may have come up as you listened. So stick around until the end of the episode for that. But now, here's my interview with former Negro League baseball player Sam Allen. You were born April 25th, 1936 in Norfolk, Virginia. Tell me a little bit about what it was like for you to grow up in Norfolk in the 1940s.
Well, I grew up with my grandfather and my mother and on Tidewater Drive, where it's right at the bridge. One house from the bridge, it was the river, Lafayette River, and it was Lee's Bridge. That was the old bridge. They said that General Lee marched his troops across there, but I lived one house from the bridge.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I went to John T. West, which was one of the first accredited black high schools in the South. I went to elementary school there.
Right, and it was an all-black school, right?
Yeah. Everything was all during that time in the 40s. And we started playing. We used to play at lunchtime. You play baseball. You had your team. You had a class team. And it was a fellow named Leonard Washington. He was my neighbor. He was like Mickey Mantle. The only problem he had, he couldn't hear. But they didn't know about the hearing aids and all that then, So he was just called deaf and dumb. But he could play. And he would hit a home run, and I would follow him, and I'd hit foul balls until the bell rang. So that's how we would win. See, if we get one run, and then I'd hit foul balls. I'd keep hitting foul balls. Then it would be time to go back to class.
It's the old four corners offense of baseball, right?
I was always small, real small. Used to play, but it was near to Barrard Park. And I used to play out there. I could play baseball, I could play basketball, and I could play football, too. And fella said, Sam, you're a good athlete. He said, but I don't think you're going to be big enough to play. So I started developing upper body strength. I had small legs and thigh, but I had developed the chest. So I started hitting balls up on the school, my elementary school. And during that time, we used to walk around, put your glove in your belt, see. And in 47, I was 11 years old when Jackie Robinson broke in with the Dodgers.
Right.
And I went to the game. He came to Norfolk to play. And the game was an 8 o'clock game. I think we went out there about 1 o'clock that day and waited. We waited for the game. But
that game was at old High Rock
Park.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to tell you about High Rock Park. During that time, black folks couldn't go in the front gate. We had to go in the side gate. So you had the bleachers. Our grandstand was next to the white bleachers. But I remember that was the New York Yankee farm team, and I saw some great ball players. I remember Whitey Ford, Jim Coates. He just died a few years ago. I remember he played. Moose Skyron played with the Tars.
The Tars, right?
Clint Courtney, I remember him because he was catcher, and he'd be down in the bullpen. He'd be smoking. He was smoking, chewed that tobacco, too. It's called him scrap iron.
And so that's how you kind of got interested in baseball, right? From your grandfather taking
every
you to
night.
those?
My grandfather, during that time, go to a game was cheap. You could go to a game for like 40 cents, 50 cents. And he used to carry me. I got in free. So he used to carry me. And what the guys used to do, the old timers, they would go out and they have a pint and they pass it around. But then my grandma would always make him carry me because, if he carried me, he had to come home, come right home. Yeah. Yeah, then when I got up a certain age, I started going to the game.
Yeah.
And I used to carry my glove, and you would catch foul balls, and you could sell the foul balls. See, if you got a foul ball, you could go in the game. So I could get 50 cents for the foul ball. So what I would do, I'd catch the foul ball, and I'd sell it. So maybe then I'd wait around and sell 2 or 3 and wait till the 7th inning. They'd let you in the game free at the 7th inning. Yeah. Every night we were at the ballpark.
But you kind of skipped over, you were talking about the game that you went to go see Jackie Robinson. What happened that day?
That night.
Yeah.
Yeah, the night. I didn't know that they were barnstorming, so yeah, but he played second that night. He missed the ball. The ball went through his legs. So everybody was kind of disappointed, you know. Yeah.
But you shook his hand that day, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I was lucky because a whole lot of people, he was, I can understand now, but everybody was running. I never seen so many people in the ballpark. You had, the park I think used to hold about 8,000, but when Jackie Robinson All-Stars played, they had to put rope in the outfield, but it had so many people on the outfield. And then the next time they had a crowd like that was in 1951. When the Cleveland Indians and the Giants played an exhibition game here.
Wow.
And then they end up playing in the World Series.
Yeah, so 1951, that was Larry Doby against Willie Mays in that game.
Right, yeah. But see, now in 52, Mays was drafted into Army. He was stationed over at Fort Houston. And it was a fellow that played with the Hilldale Giants. His name was Joe Lewis. He was a backup catcher to Sandtop. And he lived in this area, and he used to promote the games. So when Mays was stationed over at Fort Houston, on the weekend, he would book exhibition games.
Right.
So they came and got me one Sunday, and they had left-handed pitchers. Mays hit 3-4 home runs, and those left-handers, they would throw at my head, and then they would break the curveballs off on the outside of the plate. I think I hit 2 foul balls that first weekend.
Because you batted left-handed.
Yeah, I was a left-handed batter, yeah. So I hit about 2 or 3 foul balls.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, they waltzed me. First thing, you didn't have the batting helmets then that time.
Right.
See, and those left-handers throw that ball up, pin went up there close to you, knock you back.
Yeah.
Yeah, then I had 1 foot in the bucket and ready to run. But I had to learn how to hit them left-handed pitches, though, you know.
Yeah. Your baseball career began on a sandlot on Pollard Street that had rows of corn in left field, right?
Right.
When you played at Barad Park,
yes,
you played in an outfield that had a downhill grade.
Right.
Were those just neighborhood sandlot games, or were they organized Little League games? Like, who were you playing against in those games back
Well,
then?
during that time, before integration, each neighborhood had a team. So we had a league. We had the midget league.
Mm-hmm.
Then from the midget league, we played the junior league. Then from the junior league, we played the senior league, and then we played high school ball. And then once you start playing high school, you start playing on Sundays, semi-pro ball.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so were those Little Leagues segregated also?
Oh, yeah, everything was segregated.
Yeah.
Everything was segregated.
Wow.
Everything was segregated.
So when Jackie Robinson broke the color line, you were about to turn 11 years old. Did you recognize the significance of that moment when you were a kid, or did it all kind of seem like that was just something that was the norm? Because, like, how much did you really know about the history of baseball and the level of involvement that black people were allowed to have at that point?
You know, we love baseball. We went to the ballpark every night. The only black that we saw in the Piedmont League was a trainer, the Richmond Colts. Had a trainer named Zip Brooks. He was a black trainer with Richmond Colts. And he was the only black in the Piedmont League. See, Piedmont League, you had Norfolk, Portsmouth, Newport News, Lynchburg, and Roanoke.
Mm-hmm. And so 5 full teams, and the only black person you saw was a trainer.
Yeah, six teams. They had
Six full teams.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, but we didn't think. But we went to the ball because you love baseball.
Yeah.
And we would go in the side gate. You know. Yeah.
Who was your favorite team growing up?
Well, it had to be a Yankee because Norfolk was the Yankee farm team.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, you had like the Yankees, you know.
Yeah.
Then, you know, naturally, like most black folks, when Jackie Robinson went to the Dodgers, most of us like the Dodgers. But by me playing with Willie Mays, I liked the Giants.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So when you were growing up, did you have a major league player that you idolized that you wanted to be like?
Willie Mays.
Yeah?
Yeah, Willie Mays. Because he played just as hard when he was in the Army as he did when he was playing in organized ball. He didn't lighten up. He played hard. I mean, most of these players now, they play 100-something games, they get tired, and they rest them. But Mays played almost till he fall out.
Right.
Yeah.
Was it easy to follow the Negro Leagues and their teams and players as a kid, or were those games even covered in newspapers or on the radio? Or
Well, the black newspaper, you could see Negro League stats. But the only problem when Negro League teams came to town, it was exciting because the type of ball they played, it was bunting, running, home runs. And if you ever saw the Indianapolis Clowns, I mean, the Circus couldn't touch it. They had Goose Tatum.
Like the Harlem Globetrotters
yeah, he
of baseball.
played, matter of fact, Goose Tatum played with the Harlem Globetrotters.
Right.
Basketball, and he played with the Clowns in baseball. See, now, the Globetrotters was owned by Abe Saperstein, and his cousin was Sid Pollard, who owned the Indianapolis Clowns. See, and the Indianapolis Clowns had Goose Tatum, King Tuck. He had the great big long glove. And then they had Specs Bebop. He was a little midget. He was about that tall.
Mm-hmm.
Stayed drunk half of the time. Yeah, but you talking about some fun. Then they did the shadow ball.
Right.
Yeah, where they would throw the ball around like they had a ball.
They were miming like they were throwing the ball around, but they weren't actually throwing it.
Yeah, but they were a show. I mean, they were drawing. So what happened, after 55, the Clowns, they got out of the league, and they started with the black Yankees. They're all on the same bus. So they travel around with their show, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Were there famous Negro League broadcasters or journalists? Were those games ever broadcast on radio or television?
Well, you didn't have no TV. You're talking about TV.
Oh, into the 1940s and 50s?
Oh, I mean, you see a TV. You had TV. You just had the baseball. Matter of fact, Portsmouth had a suit against the New York Yankees because the Yankees started broadcasting on the radio in this area. in their territory. And Frank Lawrence, he filed a suit, but it never did come up. Baseball was so strong. But now, when it first started, they had the game on Saturdays. Baseball game on television on Saturdays.
Right.
But other than that, you didn't see any, not even the white. And that's what really killed minor league baseball and the black baseball, too, was once the TV came and you could see the major league teams rather than the minor leagues. Because, now we played in the Negro League. We went to little towns. We played up in North Dakota. And we went to a little town and we saw some trees. And someone said, "Where the ballpark?" They said, "We'll have one." So the bulldozer come along and push the trees down, and we strung up lights and we played.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. And that same.
Where's the ballpark? It'll be here in about an hour.
Yeah, and believe it or not, I volunteered with the Vietnam Veterans Coalition. I went back to South Dakota about 3 or 4 years on the Indian reservation. I used to lay tile, and so I went up there and volunteered.
Yeah.
About 3 or 4 years.
Wow. You also played football, like you said, at Booker T. Washington High School, and in one game you scored 6 touchdowns against Crestwood.
6 touchdowns and 4 extra points.
I'm sorry, I didn't mention that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you ever think about going into football, or was that just something that you did when it wasn't baseball season?
I'm 100 and...
Too small. You still scored 6 touchdowns and 4 extra points.
I'm 160 pounds with a uniform on. And, But after playing in the Negro League, I went in the Army. I did play with Fort Bragg.
Right.
Yeah, because you going in the jungle, we paratroopers, you was one of those ready outfits. You train every day like you going to war tomorrow. That's how we were prepared, every day. So I ducked that, and I was fortunate I made the team.
Yeah.
During that time, you played both ways, defense and offense. And one of the players that I played against, never forget him, he ended up with the New Orleans Saints and the New York Giants, Ernie Wheelwright.
Wow.
Great big guy. He weighed about 240, I think. And I grab him and hold him till somebody else got it.
Claude Cousins and Walt Lundy, who each went on to play in the Negro Leagues, both went to Booker T. Washington High School around that same time as you.
Yeah, but Lundy, we grew up together. He lived on Barry Street, which was about 2 blocks over. And every day we would go meet up. We had about a bucket of balls. We had about 20 balls. He would pitch them to me, and I would hit. Then I'd pitch them to him. And now he had an arm. He couldn't hit, but he had an arm. He had a major league arm. And this guy was named Harry Postow. He was one of the White Sox top scouts. And I know in the winter we went out at City Park with Hank Forbes, Clyde McCullough, a bunch of the major leaguers was working out. And they signed him out there. Yeah. And I thought that he was going to sign me, but he told me, he said, "Well, I could sign you, but the only problem is that White Sox didn't have that many farm teams."
Right.
See, and once you went to camp, I found out later, you get down there and you're going to get cut. And especially those Cubans. See, during that time, you had those Cubans that was before Castro took over, that was the dominant team, from Latin America.
So did you guys just have great coaches in high school? Like, how did that one particular high school produce so many great players?
You didn't have that coaching. What the children now got the cell phone, how they on the cell phones. We had baseball. See, so you go into the baseball game, you know all the strategies, how they're going to move, when they're going to pull the pitcher. And all. Because that was the only thing we didn't have. Matter of fact, you had the party line in your neighborhood. When you talk on the phone, your neighbors, everybody in your neighborhood knew who you were talking to, because they could pick the phone up. They didn't have to be talking about cell phone. No, so later then we got the private line,
Right. So soon after the 1951 Major League season ended, Willie Mays learned that the United States Army had drafted him to serve in the Korean War. He played in the first 34 games of the 1952 season with the New York Giants, but then he left to the Army, where he missed the rest of 1952 and all of 1953. On the weekends while he was in the Army, he did some barnstorming, and you played in some of those games. You were 17 at the time. How were you lucky enough to be involved in those games?
Well, the fellow I was telling you about, Joe Lewis, who was the promoter, he had played, he was an old ex-Negro League player. He was a catcher with the Philadelphia Hillsdales. Matter of fact, he played in the 1924 World Series, Negro League World Series, against the Kansas City Monarchs. And the fellow that that taught me to lay tile, his name was Percy Tanner. They were real close. So he said, "Well, look, Kurt Sam, And We played a game in Lynchburg that afternoon, and after the game, we showered up and they gave me $50. And I said, oh, my gracious. Couldn't wait to get back to Norfolk, you know.
That's like catching 100 foul balls.
Yeah, they said, no, I said, we're going to Winston-Salem and play tonight. I said, what? Play tonight? I said, oh, boy, no. now, I'm tired now. So that night, we were in Winston-Salem, and this guy hit a ball out in left center, and I went over. I had one of those 3-finger gloves, and the ball hit the glove and took the glove off my hand, and Mays ran the ball down, and Mays looked at my glove and threw it down. He said, boy, you got to buy you a glove. I said, yeah, but as soon as I get back to Norfolk, I'm going to buy me I bought one of them. I think I paid about $30 for one of those Wilson gloves, you know. Yeah.
That's an incredible story. Willie Mays was definitely already highly thought of, but he hadn't really become Willie Mays yet.
Well, he was the Rookie of the Year.
Right.
Yeah, he was the Rookie of the Year. But
when you were playing with him, did you know that he was going to turn into Willie Mays?
Oh, yeah.
What were some of the flashes of brilliance that you saw from him?
I remember we had one game I was playing, and Don Newcomb was supposed to pitch. He was with the Dodgers. He was stationed at Camp Pickett, but Newcomb didn't show up. So this fellow named Spencer Davis, he looked like Newcomb. He was a big guy. So he warmed up in Newport News, and they got away with it. And people were complaining, but they were able to keep the money, you know. So that night, they played in Suffolk. They said, man, we got to do something. So Mays was playing with the Newport News shipyard team over there, and they came through. So Joe asked Mays, said, well, Mays said, well, I'll play 3 innings, give me $125. So what he did, he played in real close. So the guy hit the ball over his head, and he ran back from, made that catch like he did against Vic's Works. And then when he got to bat, he got a walk, he stole second, and he stole third, then he stole home. And next, after he was signing autographs, he gone. Everybody was satisfied.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing.
I mean, he gave it 100%.
Some people think Willie Mays may have been the best player of all time.
Well, with the time he spent in the service, that knocked him out. And then when the Giants left the Polo Grounds and went to California with that first park with that wind, see, a lot of the home runs, probably would have had another 100 home runs.
Yeah, I mean, he still ended up with 660. And he missed almost his entire second season and all of his third season because he was in the service.
Right, and then when they had to get used to that out in California, they had to start hitting the ball to the right field.
Right.
Yeah, with their wind.
Well, some people believe that the best pitcher of all time may have been Satchel Paige, who you also had a chance to play with and against, right?
Yeah, Satchel. They say Satchel, but Satchel said pitcher named Joe Williams, Smoking Joe Williams. He was Satchel's idol. Say he was one of the best. Yeah, but Satchel was a great pitcher because Satchel lasted a long time. Satchel, matter of fact, I got a calendar with Satchel with the Pittsburgh Crawfords in 1932. And Satchel played in 52. I was in the Army. Satchel was playing in Canada. And Satchel played up till about 53.
Right.
Yeah. He pitched every day, but he pitched like 2 or 3 innings.
Right.
1 or 2, 3 innings, But every day he would pitch.
And how did it come about that you played? Were you on the same team as him for some games, or did you play against him?
I played against him. But before I got drafted in 1960, a friend of mine named Larry LeGrand that I played against, they went to Canada with Satchel. See, Satchel Paige All-Stars. But I'm glad I didn't because most of them end up being alcoholics with Satchel. So.
Did you ever have a chance to face him at the plate?
Oh, yeah, I faced him one time.
What was the outcome of that at bat? Do you remember?
Well, he blew me away. Because everybody was talking about the hesitation pitch, and he threw something like he was throwing aspirin tablets. Yeah, he could throw them, but he couldn't throw them for 9 innings.
Right, right. Who was the best pitcher you ever saw?
Satchel Paige had to be.
Yeah, you think so? Wow. So in 1957, you were invited to Cincinnati Reds minicamp in Douglas, Georgia. The Reds had officially signed their first black player in 1954 in Chuck Harmon, who played 94 games for the team that season. But the Reds actually had a Cuban pitcher named Tomas de la Cruz playing for them in 1944, which was 3 years before Jackie Robinson officially broke the color barrier. The Reds changed Tomas's name to Tommy and explained away his dark skin by saying that he had really descended from Spain, so he was allowed to continue playing. What was the culture like at that mini camp with the Reds? Did you feel like the odds were stacked against you because you were black, or were you just another guy trying out for the team?
Well, down in it was Douglas, Georgia. Matter of fact, we had to wait for 2 weeks because they were talking about passing the law. Now, Louisiana had the law that no blacks or white could play on the same team. So Georgia was thinking about it. See, because most of the major league teams had their minor league camps in Georgia. Mm-hmm. So what they did, they decided that they wouldn't pass it. So we went down there, but we had to stay uptown. And the minor league base was like an old airstrip. But the white players stayed out on the base, and we had a place uptown. But being uptown, that gave you a lot of freedom. You know, you could do what you want to do.
Mm-hmm. So what happened at that tryout? How did you do?
Yeah, I did pretty good. I thought I was on my way. But it was a guy who had played in the Negro League named Bill Powell. He ended up playing ended his career over in Portsmouth with the Tides. And he used to call us Junior. He said, well, Junior, I tell you, you're going to have to find somewhere else to play because there's a plane coming in tomorrow from Cuba. He said, that plane comes twice a year. We've got 50 players on there, and all of them play. And they come to bring them, and then they come in the fall to pick them up. Said, now, y'all might do pretty good, look good, but you had. So there was a fellow was down there named Bob Mitchell who had played with the Monarchs. And he was with the Monarchs. So he told me, he said, well, take my number. So if you get cut, you can call me. Mm-hmm. So I said, well, I'm going to take his number anyway, but I didn't think I was going to get cut. And finally, almost time to break camp, I got cut. And that was the year when they sent Kirk Flood. Flood, who had 1956, he burned the Carolina League up. He had about 40 home runs and drove in 100 and some runs and batted about 340 for High Point, Thomasville. What was happening, Cincinnati wasn't ready for an all-black outfield, so they sent Flood back to Savannah in the Saddle League, tried to make a third baseman out of him. See?
And so from that Reds minicamp, then you went to Jacksonville for a tryout with the Kansas City Monarchs, right?
Right.
And how did you get there?
I left here. I called Bob Mitchell. I told him, I said, man, look, he said, come on down, man. You can make this team. So I had about $25 in my pocket. So I went and got me a one-way ticket to Jacksonville.
The train ticket?
No, bus ticket.
A bus
for
ticket.
$19, you know. So I left that. It was a Good Friday night. I'll never forget it. And I left and I had my shoes. I had a pair of shoes. My best shoes was French Rounders. And I put them up over the seat. I didn't put them in the bag. And between here and Suffolk, somebody stole my shoes. And I told the bus driver, I said, man, somebody stole my shoes. So the bus driver looked at me and said, what you want me to do, buy you a new pair? So, man, I was mad.
And you were down to $6.
Yeah, I got $6 in my pocket going to Jacksonville. You got to have nerve, man.
Yeah.
So when I get to Jacksonville, the Monarchs was down on Astor Street, never forget it, the Cobblestone Street. They getting ready to load up to come to Charleston to play that Sunday. Because the bus ride from here took me from Good Friday night to 12 o'clock that Saturday night when I got to Jacksonville. So now, when I get there, I get to the hotel. I think the taxi cost me $2. I had $4. So then when I get on the bus, I get on the bus with the Monarchs. So we go back to Charleston. So when we get to Charleston, we're supposed to play the Jacksonville All-Stars, a guy named Jim Williams. But I didn't know he was one of them shysters. So he told the man, he come up with 3 players and told him the bus broke down somewhere down by the Okefenokee, and he brought 3 of the players with him. So the man said, why you didn't bring more than 3? So he said, no, I couldn't get but 3 that wanted to come in the car. So that Sunday, the park was loaded with people. So rather than give that money back, see, the Monarchs hadn't broke camp, and they had a lot of extra players. So he said, well, Dismuke, he was the manager. He spent 40 years with the Monarchs.
Dizzy Dismukes, right?
Yeah. Then he was a scout with the Cubs, and he was a manager with the Monarchs. And matter of fact, he was with that team with Satchel and them when they went down into Dominican Republic. And they played, for Trujillo that time. And he had the fine squad lined up for him if they didn't win, Yeah, but he was with that team. And he was about 80 years old. So he said, well, Sam, I don't like to do this, but we can't let this money go.
Right.
So you got to play with
the Jacksonville All-Stars.
Today. Yeah. I said, okay. But that was the best thing that ever happened to me.
How'd you do that day?
First time up, I got a single, and I was able to steal second. Then I think next time I struck out, and then the next time at bat, I hit one over the scoreboard. Yeah. So that evening after the game, Dismuke said, well, I don't have to worry about you beating me anymore. He said, you got a contract. I think the contract was about $150. I think it was about, all I know that I had a job. Look, and I had $4 in my pocket. So what they did, they give you $2 the night for the next day. That's your meal money. You got $2 a day meal money.
Yeah.
So down south, you get a breakfast. You get cheese and eggs, orange juice for 50 cents. See, in lunchtime, I get 10-cent bowl of beans and 10-cent bowl of rice and mix them up. Yeah. And then that evening, you could get a steak. You didn't have enough to get a steak.
And so on the days where $2 wasn't enough to feed you 3 meals a day, what would you do to keep from going hungry?
Well, you had to spend some of your money. You had to add something to it. Now in Chicago, you had to add $1 to it because get breakfast was around $3. You know? Yeah.
I also heard that you would carry a jar of honey and peanut butter and crackers in your bag.
Yeah.
You learned some tricks when you'd go to restaurants. What were some of those tricks to get by, maybe get a little more food than you would have normally gotten?
Well, one thing I used to always look at the waitress. When I played, I always try to find me a waitress. Because when you find a waitress, she could slip you a bowl of beef stew. Yeah.
Let's talk about Dizzy Dismukes real quick. So he was regarded as one of the best pitchers in black baseball during the 1910s and early 1920s.
Right. He was a submarine pitcher.
Yeah. People say that he taught Carl Mays how to pitch, actually. Right.
Yeah, but Dismuke was good baseball, man, because I know when I was with the Monarchs and I came back to the dugout, and he was sitting in the dugout, and he said, couldn't get that curveball. I said, now, you know it was curveball. He said, he could tell by the rotation of the ball. And then I picked that up, you know. But if the ball has got a lot of spin on it, it's a breaking pitch. But you got to be sharp now, because you're setting for that fastball. But if you see that ball come with a lot of spin on it, it's a breaking pitch.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he used to wear suits, just like, you know, the Dodgers, when Burke Shotton managed the Dodgers, he told his wife he wouldn't put on another uniform. Branch Ricketts said, well, manage in your suit. And you won't tell her a lie, you know, yeah. But that's what he used to do. He used to manage in his suit.
Yeah, and he was a college man who was a smart, studious player with a great memory. He was a strategist on the field. He knew the batter's tendencies and would position his infielders where he felt the batter would hit the ball according to the pitch that he knew he was about to throw. Some people thought that he was a trick pitcher because of the way his breaking balls moved so much. After Rube Foster died in 1930, Dismukes took control of the Chicago American Giants, and as a coach and manager, he was known for being a great teacher of the game to young players. During the 1930s and 40s, he entered into the management end of baseball, also managing with Detroit, Birmingham, Memphis, Kansas City at various times. He moved from the dugout to the front office and was the traveling secretary with the Kansas City Monarchs for many years and was the personnel director for the team for over a decade from 1942 to 1952, which meant that he was instrumental in acquiring Jackie Robinson to play for the Monarchs in 1945. But he also recognized Robinson's limitations at shortstop, so he asked Cool Papa Bell to convince Jackie that shortstop was not his best position. What did you learn from him with him being your manager? What did you learn from Dizzy Dismukes?
Well, Dismuke was a fellow that you thought he was a preacher. If they were trying to get a ball player, they would send Dismuke to his house, and he would talk to the parents. And he was real smooth now. And what impressed me was when I first met him and a fellow named Jim Robinson were roommates. And he was shaving, and he had that belt. He was sharpening that razor, you know, and he had to shave with that straight razor.
Right.
Yeah. And when he used to travel, he would sit on the bus, and we would let the seats all the way back, and he would ride all over the country just like this. And whenever you got off in New York or those places, you couldn't keep up with it. And whenever we saw any of those guys like Elson Howard, they were crazy about it, Dismuke. Yeah, he was a fine fellow, really.
The Monarchs owner at the time was Ted Raspberry, and he attended Mississippi Industrial College and graduated with a degree in teaching in 1933. In 1935, Raspberry moved to Grand Rapids, Michigan to play with Elster's Colored Athletics, a local semi-professional baseball team. By 1946, he purchased his first team, which was the Grand Rapids Black Sox. He tried to enter that team into the Negro American League, but he was rejected due to Grand Rapids having such a small black population. In 1953, Raspberry purchased an Indianapolis team and moved them to Detroit and renamed them the Detroit Stars. So he reapplied to the Negro American League in 1953 and this time was accepted. And then he purchased the Kansas City Monarchs in 1956, but the league would not allow Raspberry to own two teams at the same time, so he sold the Detroit Stars to his niece and secretary Minnie Forbes, but he kept the Monarchs. Did you have much interaction with Ted Raspberry while he played for his team, or did he kind of let Dizzy Dismukes run the show?
Diz ran the show.
Yeah.
They don't tell that, but Raspberry was a big number. He controlled half of the numbers in Detroit, controlled all of them in Grand Rapids, Flint, Saginaw. See, that was our Wall Street. He had money, let me tell you, he had money because the basketball team, the Harlem Satellites, when Goose Tatum left the Globetrotters, that was, they said it was Goose Tatum's team, but that was Raspberry's team. Raspberry had money. Matter of fact, his niece, Minnie Forbes, we were together in Detroit last year, really.
Cool.
But Raspberry, we were up in South Dakota, and we had to go to about 3 towns to get a bank that could cash the check. But whenever payday come, you could always get paid with the Monarchs. And Raspberry was the first black owner of the Monarchs. See, this guy, Wilkins, if you see him up here, he was the first owner.
Right.
And then Tom Beard was the second. Because Tom Beard and Branch Rickey battling, he tried to sue Branch Rickey, but baseball was so strong he never did get Branch Rickey took them players. See?
Right. Well, the Negro Leagues provided jobs for players, managers, and umpires, but it also created jobs for bus drivers and concessionaires and secretaries.
Hotels, and whenever we went into a town, I remember when I was with Raleigh, a fellow named Arthur Doug, he had about 400 or 500 jukeboxes all over North Carolina. And when we went into a town, we were in Rockingham. He said, "Hold it, don't go in this restaurant, because he don't have my jukebox in his place." So we wouldn't be 2 busloads, so we wouldn't go in that. So the next time he come through there, he said, "It's all right, he got my jukebox."
Because he knew that he just lost 2 busloads of customers.
Yeah.
What impact did the Negro Leagues have on the black communities in the cities that had teams?
Now, Memphis was owned by the Martin, Dr. Martin.
Right.
J.B. Martin, W.S. Martin, B.B. Martin. It was 4 brothers.
Right.
All of them were doctors, and they had initials. They didn't have names.
Right.
But they had plenty of money.
Yes, they did.
Yeah, they had plenty of money. They owned the Chicago American Giants and the Memphis Red Sox.
Right. They also owned their own stadium.
Yeah.
They owned
Martin
it was called
Stadium, yeah.
Martin Stadium. It was built by the Martin brothers.
Right. But see what happened, it was another fella had it and he borrowed some money from the Martin and they took the stadium from him.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that was because May 17th, 1958, the primary owner of the Memphis Red Sox, William S. Martin, passed away following a year-long illness. And after his death, his widow, Ava Cartman Martin, and his brother, B.B. Martin, took over operation of the team. So they completed the 1958 season, but the Martins still owed money on the mortgage for Martin Stadium. And that's when they started entertaining offers on the stadium, but they couldn't really reach a deal with an interested buyer. You played with the Memphis Red Sox in 1959, which was the year after all this turnover and turmoil.
Right.
On May 28th, 1960, B.B. Martin announced that he was dissolving the Red Sox altogether, saying it has been a losing proposition for the past 4 or 5 years. The Negro American League would continue on for just a couple more years before that dissolved completely too. Could you see the writing on the wall during that 1959 season?
When I went into Negro League, it was on the down because Major League Baseball was getting the blue chippers. All the best black ball players were being signed by Major League Baseball, Major League teams.
Right.
Yeah. But Martin, see, now when you played with Memphis, I played with them in 59. Now they were one of the better teams in the league to play because Martin had a hospital over in Mississippi, and Lefty Mathis played with the Memphis Red Sox, and he hurt his arm, and the doctor went to operate on him, and Dr. Martin operated on him, and he ended up pitching again.
Wow.
Yeah, but now J.B. was the last commissioner of the Negro League.
Right. Since Jackie Robinson had broken the color barrier when you were a kid, pretty much your entire baseball career, in theory, you had a reasonable chance to make it to the major leagues. Was that something that you and your teammates had in mind as the ultimate goal, or was playing at a high level in the Negro Leagues what you guys considered the pinnacle?
Oh yeah, we thought that after a while you found out the competition of black ball players was so many good ball players. It was hard. Bus ride and all that was exciting the first couple of years, but after 3 or 4 years, you get tired, riding 500 miles and then you got that uniform. keep it in the back of the bus, and when you take it out, it's wet. You got to shake it out and get to the ballpark early and let it air out. After the game, you take a shower and you ride 400 or 500 miles to the next game. Then after a few years, my last year out there, I said, well, no need of me going. I don't think I would make it. I started to quit. I said, I'm not going back out there. I'm going on get me a job, you know. But then some said, try one more time. So I did, and I'm glad I did because that's why I get a stifles now. If I hadn't, I wouldn't have been getting a stifles.
Right. Mm-hmm. Some people today are aware of the Negro Motorist Green Book, which was a guidebook for African-American travelers that provided a list of hotels.
The Green Book?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, see, our bus drivers knew the Green Book.
Okay.
In the head.
That's what I wanted to ask.
Green Book. Look, we knew because they had been there. We had a driver when I was with Memphis that couldn't read, named Sam Roth. But he knew all you had to do was tell him where you were going, and one player would sit on the keg. We always had a player sit on the keg, keep the driver from going to sleep. See, and what you would do at night, you didn't have the super highways like you got now. You had that one highway, and at night, he would straddle the line. That's what keep him stayed awake.
Mm-hmm.
And you would talk to him, and he would, right then when you see a car coming, you would bear to the right. But that's how he stayed awake traveling. And once I was with Kansas City, we were out in Nebraska, and where you see nothing but open fields and cattle, we ended up in the cornfield.
He bared too far to the right.
No, he went to sleep. Yeah, he went to sleep. I mean, you don't see anything but, all day. You see nothing but open field,
right.
Cattle, open field, cattle. Yeah.
Yeah. Was it up to the bus drivers to know what restaurants and hotels and gas stations were safe to go to?
Yeah, it was. Well, what you would do, well, some places, like Mississippi, you go to a little place and you say, well, do you give discount on gas? Because we got that tank on both sides.
Right.
And guy said, yeah. He said, well, can we use your restroom to wash up? He said, no. So then you ride a little further. And this, I don't know if you saw what Buck was talking about when Jackie Robinson went with Kansas City Monarchs, said, Robinson started, said, where you going? He said, I'm going to use the restroom. Said, the man said, you can't use the restroom. So Robinson said, can't use the restroom, take the nozzle out the tank. And so the man said, well, go ahead and use it, but don't stay too long.
Mm-hmm.
Buck said they had been going through that for years, and nobody had said anything, but Robinson was a little different.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that means from then on, they wouldn't go anywhere where they couldn't use the restroom. See, and that's what we would do. We'd ride, and you see one place, the guy said, he'd look around, he would say, yeah, come on, use the restroom. And then he'd have a little store. We'd buy all the potted ham, and he'd sell out everything in the little store. Then he'd close up. He done sold 100 gallons of gas and close up.
Yeah.
He made his money.
Right, that's enough business for the day, right?
Mm-hmm.
What about some of the obstacles that you guys faced trying to stay in hotels?
Now, we had some decent hotels. And it's a strange thing, most of the hotels were owned by black women. So I don't know if they could get the loans or what happened, but I know even here in Norfolk, the Plaza Hotel was Lady Bonnie McEachin. She had a hotel. And in Birmingham, Mary Alexander had the Alexander Hotel. And in Chattanooga, I think it was the Martin sisters, they had a hotel. But the hotel had clean sheets. I mean, it was clean now. The only problem, you would have 10 rooms on the floor, and you might be staying here, and Nat King Cole will be next door to you. But what you'd have to do, you'd have a 2-bathroom, so you had to wait in line to get in the bathroom. See? Now, you didn't have TVs in the room. You had a TV down in the lobby.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in the room, you had a radio, 10 cents for the radio. But now down in the lobby, you had one TV in the hotel. Yeah.
Interesting.
And then once we were in Indianapolis, so they're going to put us in the Foster Hotel. That was a white hotel. But they put us over there next to the laundry room. Now, it was 100 degrees in that laundry. They washing them sheets and stuff. We next door. And we were better off. We went and got on the bus.
And what would you guys do if there were instances where you couldn't find a safe hotel?
We sleep on the bus. We had no problem sleeping on the bus. We some weeks we sleep in a hotel 3 nights and we ride 4 nights.
Mm-hmm. Ride
all night. And had one fellow on the team that could tell jokes. And you'd be laughing and joking and laughing and joking. And I think that was, I found out later, that's how they kept him on the team. Yeah.
He couldn't hit, but he could tell a joke.
Yeah, he could tell a joke. Yeah. Yeah, he couldn't pitch, but he would tell a joke.
I've heard that about a lot of Negro League players, that they were all very funny.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's what you had to do. You had to be able to be funny. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Yeah, a lot of fun.
In the instances where you guys couldn't find hotels to sleep and you would sleep on the bus, where would your team shower and dress before the game the next day?
At most ballparks had showers.
Okay.
And that was one thing that we were blessed with. At the ballpark, they had hot showers in most of the ballparks.
Yeah. And when you were able to stay in hotels, one of your roommates was Frank Williams, right? He was the brother of Billy Williams?
Yeah, that was when I was in Memphis, yeah.
But this was really before Billy had made it big, right? I mean,
right.
Did Frank ever really talk about his brother? Like, did he...
Yeah, matter of fact, in 1959, when Billy came up with the Cubs, we were in Chicago for the All-Star game, for the East-West game.
Mm-hmm.
And Frank went out to meet Billy. Yeah, we met Billy.
Interesting. Did you guys follow the superstars of the white major leagues and keep up with their careers, or were you guys just kind of doing your own thing?
But one thing about, I can say, when we ran into players who had played in the Negro League, they reached out to us. Because
Cool.
They knew what they had been through, But they were always, you need anything, buy us steak dinners and, yeah.
Wow. In 1957 with the Monarchs, you played left field and you had a .295 batting average, but you led the Negro Leagues in runs. Where did you usually bat in the batting order?
I was a leadoff batter.
Yeah?
Leadoff batter, yeah.
So were you fast? Did you get a lot of steals?
Yeah, I was fast. Then I could bunt, too, see.
Uh-huh.
Now, a lot of guys in the majors now can't bunt, but I could bunt, see. If you played Negro League, you had to know how to bunt. And if you had a runner on first and you don't bunt him down in second, that was a 50-cent fine. See, at the end of the year, they had what you call a hog party. They take all that money.
Uh-huh.
Now, 50 cents, you wasn't getting but $2 a day meal money now, so you're going to bunt him down.
Right.
Because, they said Rube Foster,
Uh-huh.
he used to teach his players to bunt in the cap. See, that's what I do with youngsters now. Put a cap down and let them practice.
Uh-huh.
See, and most of them don't try to bunt now because what they'll do, they'll bunt twice, then they swing away. But they can't hit. They need to bunt 20 times and swing away twice.
Right.
Yeah, because they can't hit.
And so what was your strategy when you were trying to bunt? What made you such a good bunter?
Well, I was fast and I could drag. And
So you drag it down the first baseline?
I could drag it first base line, then I could drag it down third base. If whatever way the third baseman played, then I could drag it by the pitcher.
Mm-hmm.
It was the left-handed pitcher, whichever way he fell off the mound.
Right.
See? Plus, we had a fellow, Jim Robinson. He had played with A&T, and he was a real good number 2 batter because he could hit behind the runner. And what we would do, I'd get on, and if I didn't steal, he'd hit the ball to right field, and I'd end up on third base. See, and we'd get a sacrifice fly.
Mm-hmm.
We'd get a run. We'd score runs without a hit. That's how I led the league.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what about when you were standing in the box and you knew you were going to bunt? Where would you physically stand inside the batter's box?
Oh, I'm standing like I'm going to hit.
Uh-huh.
Oh, yeah.
And then would you run up and bunt, or would you...
Oh, no. You just
drop down the bat real quick at the end?
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Yeah.
What do you think was your greatest strength as a ball player?
To be able to drag.
Yeah?
Mm-hmm. And then what I used to do a couple of times, my friend Pedro, we're good friends now, but when the first time I met him, first pitch, I hit quite a few home runs on the first pitch, like Ricky Henderson.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that first pitch, see the pitcher's trying to get it over the plate.
Yeah.
So what you do, you hit that first pitch, and then they know that you're going to hit the first pitch. You lay off that first pitch, because they said, well, he's going to try to hit that first pitch, and they don't give you anything good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was your favorite city to play in?
New York,
Why? What made it so cool?
because I always had great days. I had Evans Field, and my uncle lived in New York, and I know I played Evans Field. I hit a home run in Bedford Avenue, and I hit a couple of triples, and I had a great day at Evans Field. And then Yankee Stadium, I hit one. Matter of fact, 57, I led the league in runs scored, but 58, the Monarchs, they sent me to Raleigh.
To play for the Raleigh Tigers.
Yeah, but the player that replaced me had played in the majors in 1947. Willard Brown, he had played with the St. Louis Browns.
Right.
So he came back to the Monarchs in 58. So that's why they sent me to Raleigh, because they was trying to strengthen the Raleigh team.
Yeah.
But in 59, playing with Memphis, we met the Monarchs, and I hit one out by the monuments, Yankee Stadium. And a fellow named Jesse Mitchell ran it down, and we beat the Monarchs 1-0. So that's
Incredible.
yeah.
Did you have a city that you didn't like playing in? for whatever reason? Whether it was the stadium or the people who were in the crowd or anything like that?
No.
Did you have a favorite ballpark to play at? Was it Ebbets Field or was it Yankee Stadium?
Ebbets Field had to be. Because Ebbets Field wasn't like a major league park. You were close. You were right on the field. People sitting right on top of you.
Yeah.
If you were at Ebbets Field, yeah.
Cool. And what about some of the fields that weren't white major league fields? What were the...
Well, they had park up in St. Joe, Michigan. That was a ballpark. They had the cushion on the outfield fence.
Uh-huh.
And then they had the pop-up where the umpire, all they had to do was hit the thing and the ball would pop up.
Cool.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What were the condition of the fields that you guys used to play on? Were some of the fields nicer than others?
From A to Z.
Yeah?
Yeah. Because we had, matter of fact, some of those fields, you slide, you get that skin burn.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And what I would do, you make a donut there, and you put that donut around that, and when you get a scab on it and it almost heal up, then when you slide again, you break that scab on it. Yeah. Sometimes it take you a month almost.
Yeah.
But see, one thing in playing in the Negro League, you couldn't get sick. If you got sick, the man send you home. When you get hurt, you're going home.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was going to say roster sizes for Negro League teams were usually only about 15 or 16 players.
Plus what you did after half of the season, you sent one outfielder home. And if you pitched the night before, you played outfield the next night.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they cut back.
Yeah.
Yeah, after.
So is that why so many Negro League players knew how to play multiple positions? Because they had to?
Yeah, you pitch. You had to play first base.
And how would teams deal with injuries? Like, did you guys have your own team trainers?
No, I used to do trainers. And I told you, if you got sick, you just had to go home.
What about if there was like a serious injury, like if somebody broke an arm or broke a leg during a game?
We were blessed, you know. We had no accidents, and we had no injuries because we were traveling, and it had to be the good Lord to bless us because we riding down those highways, and out of all the years, 40 years they played, they had 2 deaths. The Cleveland Buckeyes, I think, had serious accidents, but other than that,
wow,
no.
There have been a lot of stories told about Negro League teams that would play 3 games in one day. Did you guys ever have to do that?
I mean, 3. We played, let me tell you, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, you play 1 game. Friday night, you play a doubleheader. Saturday, you play a doubleheader. Sunday, you play 2 doubleheaders.
You played 4 games in one day?
Yeah.
Seriously, how would that feasibly work? Would you start the first game at 9 in the morning?
In the morning, you play a doubleheader in the morning.
Starting at what time?
At 10 o'clock.
10 o'clock. Okay,
Yeah.
so that game ends about noon?
Yeah.
And then you play that second game, and you're done about 2 o'clock.
And then 8 o'clock, 7 o'clock, you play a doubleheader.
Wow. Would it be in the same ballpark, or would you travel to a different city?
We travel 40 miles.
Oh, my gosh.
And then with Memphis, we did that, and then we had to travel back to Memphis. But they had to give us a couple of days off, man. We were beat.
So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, that's 4 games. Then you play 2 more on Friday, that's 6 games.
Right.
2 more on Saturday, that's 8 games. And 4 games on Sunday. You play 12 games a week.
Yeah, you didn't play a doubleheader, 2 doubleheaders every Sunday, but some Sundays you did.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
And so when you look at like your statistics, we're trying to look them up. It said that you had 41 hits in the 1957 season. Clearly you had way more than that if you're playing 12 games in a week. So do you have what your actual statistics are? Like, did you ever keep a notebook or a binder full of what your box scores or anything like that?
What we used to do is our manager, Dismute, he kept the score. So we had the accurate score. In the black newspaper, they had, but they had some of the players was supposed to be batting 350, and I played against them, 5 or 6 games, and they didn't get a hit, So now, but they were trying to publicize, yeah.
Right. Yeah. Interesting. What kind of media attention did your games get? Like, were there newspaper writers at every game, or just some games, or were they ever broadcast on radio?
Now, if you played in Birmingham, they would broadcast the games. That was the mecca of black baseball. On a Sunday, they'd have close to 10,000 fans in Birmingham.
And where was that, at Rickwood Field?
Yeah, Rickwood.
Yeah.
And what they would try to do is try to get in there on a Sunday. That's your payroll,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Players today are going to have thousands of super high-resolution photos and videos to look back on of their careers after they retire as a way to remember their playing days. Do you have a lot of pictures of you during your playing days?
No, there's a picture right back there. 3 of us, you see.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one. And, during that time, you didn't have the camera. Now, I tell you, when I was with Memphis, it was a fella that used to be at the ballpark. His name was Ernest Withers. He was the one that J. Edgar Hoover had him to spy on Martin Luther King. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I remember Withers would be out there before the game taking pictures. And during that time, I had to go to the dark room and develop them. Mm-hmm. And he would go and around the 4th inning, he'd be back selling them.
Wow.
And he had a bunch of children, they'd be selling them.
Does it bother you that your games weren't documented and preserved in a way that the games of the white major leagues are and always have been?
No. I was glad that I could play baseball.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I was proud to play. Really, I wanted to play in organized ball, but it didn't happen. And I cried. But I came out better playing in the Negro League because I get a check every month.
Yeah.
And they gave me a big 100-some thousand check. Plus, this past year I was invited to the All-Star game.
Right.
And I signed autographs and got $3,700 for signing autographs. So I'm satisfied. I'm a Negro League player.
Were there ever problems with money during your playing career? Like, did paychecks ever bounce, or did you guys ever get paid late, or would teams try to stiff you on the road?
Let me tell you. Played with Raleigh in 58. We were going to Welch, West Virginia.
Uh-huh.
We got up in the Welch. The bus broke down, and Dub was with us. He was supposed to get paid.
Mm-hmm.
So he told the lady, said, look, this is my team. He had a big bill of money and had a pistol on the side, too. And told the lady, said, look, you want me to pay you now? Feed them, give them 3 meals a day, and place to stay. I'll be back in a week to pick them up. She said, no, Mr. Dub, you all right. That's the worst mistake she So about a week later, we were sitting at the breakfast. She said, I got some bad news and some real bad news. She said, I'm going to give you the real bad news first. Said, Doug sent up here and got the bus yesterday. So the bus gone. She said, now what I'm going to do, I'm going to give you breakfast. You're going to get a sandwich, and your dinner going to be in the air. So we said, what do you mean in the air? She said, after you get this sandwich, y'all gonna air out of here. You getting out. So I run to the telephone and I called my mama. And I said, Mama, send me $100. I'm stranded. She said, boy, you must think I'm crazy. You go to the Greyhound bus station, I'll send you a ticket.
Mm-hmm.
I said, no, I wasn't ready to come home because I'm going to try to get back to Raleigh to see Dub and get some of my money.
Mm-hmm.
So I called my uncle. So he wired me 50. And the fella that I worked for, I know he was going to send me some money because he's going to put me to work as soon as I get back. I was laying tire with. So I had $100, and I had a fella named, they called him Rockeye Hayward. He was from Jacksonville, Florida. We had played together with the Monarchs. So we got out on the highway. I had a suitcase with a record player, about 10 albums, and we were so lucky we got a ride right into Raleigh. So we went to Raleigh, and we stayed at before when the Y used to have dormitories. You didn't have no homeless people then.
Mm-hmm. At the YMCA.
Yeah. See, because you could go to the Y, and they had bunks. It'd be 50 people could stay out there in the bunk. Mm-hmm. If you had 50 cents, you could go. Now, if you had $2, you could get a private room. So we went to Raleigh, and we had a private room, a couple of dollars. And then I caught up with Doug, and he did give me most of my money because I told him I was going to come back the next year.
Mm-hmm.
And Hayward, he didn't get in, so I helped send him home, but he never did send me my money back.
And what about teams? Like if you were playing a road game, would the home team ever try to stiff you guys or lie to you about like, oh, there were only 1,200 people here today, and you knew like there's 5,000 people in the stands? Like, would that kind of stuff happen ever? No, we didn't have it. But I know playing local, I had this fellow that I worked for. He used to sell the tickets, and they had a little fellow called Kelly, a little short fellow. He'd be on the gate taking up tickets. So he would take your tickets, put them in this pocket, and take the other fellow's ticket and put them in this pocket. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but they used to shite you. Like you look in the stands, it looked like it's 3,000 people. They said, well, we didn't have but 1,100, you know. Then when the Jackie Robinson All-Stars came and they had all them people, they really took a lot of money. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Who was the best team in the Negro Leagues when you played in the Negro Leagues? Well, Kansas City was the best. Kansas City was the best. Yeah? And what made them the best? Well, they had the better players. Mm-hmm. But now Memphis was more organized because you had your own ballpark. Staying in Memphis,
I had a room, and they had a hospital over in Mississippi, so we had a hospital bed in the room.
Mm.
And you had a kitchen where you could cook. And you had laundry room where you could wash your clothes. See? And what you do with Memphis, you go out on the road and you stay 15 days, and the money that they gave you for meals, they didn't take it out. And then you come home for 15 days.
Mm-hmm.
See, so you didn't have to travel. But Kansas City and all the other teams, you stayed on the road.
Right.
Yeah, you stayed on the road, but not Memphis. See? Yeah.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
What percentage of the crowds at Negro League games were white?
I'd say maybe 10%. Mm-hmm. Even down in Mississippi, they had a lot of white fans.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they had a lot of white fans down in Mississippi.
And what about the umpires? Were the umpires normally white or were they normally black?
Yeah, black and white umpires.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do you remember any of them in particular? Did any of them stand out or have their own personalities and things like that?
Well, they had one umpire in Kansas City. He was a pretty good umpire, but we had pretty decent umpires. But see, one thing, in the Negro League, our strike zone was from your shoe top to the bit of your cap.
But
See,
you knew that going in, though, right?
Huh?
You knew that going into
I knew
a
that,
game.
yeah. See, that's why a lot of the guys like Mays and all those guys that played in the Black League could hit because they didn't have to wait for a strike. See, they could hit balls, too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you hit the high ball. See, that high ball, you catch that high ball up, you take it out the park.
Yeah.
And then that curve ball breaking down low, you golf it.
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Who was the best coach that you ever had during your entire baseball career?
Well, Dismuke had to be the best coach.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And why? Was he just
He
so
was
much smarter
knowledgeable.
about baseball?
He was
Yeah.
knowledgeable, and then he was a nice guy, real nice guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he had experience, and he could tell you about Satchel, Josh, and he would tell stories. I mean, you would listen at him for hours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was the best Josh Gibson story that you've ever heard?
Well, they said he hit a ball. They said hit a ball in Portsmouth, and the ball hit the train cars and ended up in Pittsburgh. Yeah.
I love that story.
Yeah.
What was the loudest cheer that you ever heard on a baseball diamond?
The loudest I heard was in Brooklyn. Yeah, we played in Brooklyn.
Was it just because there were so many people, or did some amazing play happen that everybody got so excited about, or why?
Yeah, but when I hit a home run in Evans Field, that was to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a pretty special memory.
Mm-hmm.
Even though Jackie Robinson and Larry Doby broke the color line in 1947, by the time you were playing in the Negro Leagues in 1957, the Phillies, the Tigers, and the Red Sox still had not integrated. Did you feel like you guys were being excluded?
Not really. But look, in 47, you had 5 that played. You had Jackie,
Mm-hmm.
and you had Dan Bankhead that was with the Dodgers.
Right.
Then you had Larry Doby
Mm-hmm.
that was with Cleveland Indians. And you had with the St. Louis Browns, you had Willard Brown and Hank Thompson.
Right.
So all of them played in 47.
Right.
But they just talk about Robinson and
And Larry Doby.
Doby, yeah. But you had 5 that played.
Mm-hmm.
See, and Willard Brown, he had a home run, and the fella broke the bat up. So he didn't care about going back to the majors. Now, all of them went back except him. And Dan Bankhead had about a 10-4 record in Major League Baseball, if you look it up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Of those 5 players that initially played in 1947, do you think one of them had the hardest experience?
Well, Robinson was naturally, because, first, see, but Robinson, they sent him to Montreal the year before.
Mm-hmm.
The other players went right from Negro League into Major League.
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
In 1960, you were assigned to the Army 82nd Airborne. Even though you'd been playing organized ball since the time you were 15 or 16, your baseball career was really just starting to take off. You were entering your prime at 24, 25 years old, and now you had to pack up and go to the military. What was that like?
Well, during that time, hey, you said Ted Williams and Johnny Padres, all those guys, everybody went to service. During that time, that was a thing that you did.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you got drafted. So just got drafted. Yeah.
While you were in the military, you continued to play baseball and football, and you were stationed at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Did you have dreams of continuing your career when you got out of the military?
No, because I got extended 2 months and 10 days beyond my time, 2 years, yeah. Now, after the military, I got married, and, when you get a wife, you can't go out there on that road and try to get paid and miss a month pay. You need a job.
Right. And so what did you do? What were the jobs that you got?
Well, I laid tile and carpet, and then I worked on the waterfront along Choman. Yeah.
Let's go over some of the awards that former Negro League players won in the white major leagues within the first 15 years or so of integration. Jackie Robinson won Rookie of the Year in 1947 and National League MVP in 1949. Roy Campanella won NL MVP in 1951, 53, and 55. Don Newcomb won Rookie of the Year in 1949 and won the National League MVP and Cy Young Awards in 1956. Sam Jethro won Rookie of the Year in 1950. Willie Mays won Rookie of the Year in 1951 and won NL MVP in 54 and 65. Joe Black won Rookie of the Year in 1952. Junior Gilliam won Rookie of the Year in 1953. Henry Aaron won NL MVP in 1957. Ernie Banks won NL MVP in 1958 and 59, and Elston Howard won AL MVP in 1963. And those are just the players who won the major awards who had previously played in the Negro Leagues. But the list goes on, especially when you consider guys like Frank Robinson, who never played in the Negro Leagues but was a black ball player, and he won the NL Rookie of the Year in 1956, the NL MVP in 61, and the AL MVP in 66 when he won the Triple Crown that year. Not to mention the dozens of All-Star Game appearances by players who had previously played in the Negro Leagues or black ball players who came up shortly after integration. Let's imagine that Branch Rickey never signed Jackie Robinson and white Major League Baseball never got integrated. If all of those great black and Latin American ball players had remained in the Negro Leagues instead of joining the white Major Leagues, do you think the Negro Leagues would have been as good of a league as the white Major Leagues?
Now, that wouldn't have happened, you see, because it's a money thing. And if it wasn't Rickey, it would be someone else. See, Rickey did a great thing, but he was with St. Louis Cardinals. But see, Brooklyn was ideal for integration. And he knew that it was going to make money. What did he say? That people was going to come in, and he knew what was going to happen. Blacks were going to see blacks playing on the white team, so they forgot all about them playing on the black team. All they wanted to see them on the white team. And most of them that played, they were experienced, and just like Campanella, they when the Dodgers signed him, they sent him up to Nashua. But Campanella had played in the Negro League for 10 years, see? And most of those guys had been around.
Right.
And they traveling, you traveling on that bus, and then all of a sudden you get a chance to stay in a hotel, and decent hotel, and eat 3 good meals a day. They burn the league up. Yeah.
Was it kind of a sense of pride for you guys that you still had your own league and did things your own way even after the white major leagues had been integrated?
Yeah, well, it was, it was a place to play. Because see what happened in beginning of the integration of the league, certain teams weren't going to have but so many blacks on it. And if you were in the minor leagues and you played down in Georgia, you might be 2 players, and one of them has to be a pitcher.
By the time you played, and you kind of touched on this earlier, most of the real superstars of the Negro Leagues had already been signed by the white major leagues. Who were some of the great black baseball players still playing in the Negro Leagues when you were there?
Well, when I was there, you had a fellow named Jesse Mitchell from Birmingham. He was an outfielder. He looked like Mays, and he played like Mays. See, and my roommate, Frank Williams, see, that was his brother, Billy. He was Billy's idol, see. But he looked like Hank Aaron. And he batted like Aaron because all of them was from Mobile, Alabama.
Who was the best black baseball player you played with or against who never had a chance to make it to the white major leagues?
I think Frank Williams was
the
best.
And what position did he play?
He was an outfielder.
Do you have a favorite story about a player that most people have never heard of?
Willie Watch was one. He was about close to 40 years old, and he drank. He was one of the few players that stayed drunk most of the time, but he could hit. He hit a ball in Yankee Stadium. I wasn't there, but he hit a ball straight away center field in Yankee Stadium.
Wow.
And the Cardinals ended up signing him and sent him to Omaha. Yeah.
There were also Latin American ball players in the Negro Leagues, which many people don't necessarily know or think of. Who were some of the good Latin American players that you remember playing with?
We had a shortstop named Felix Ortez. He'd been in the Pittsburgh Pirate organization, And we had a left-handed pitcher, a Cuban named Cardenas, Oscar Cardenas. And the Detroit Stars, they had a Cuban pitcher named Saladonia. They had Pedro Sierra. They had about 3 Cuban pitchers.
Yeah, interesting. Was that the first time that you'd ever met a Latin American person?
No, because before I played in the Negro League, the Monarchs had a Cuban team that traveled around. They brought some players in from Cuba, and they didn't play in the Negro League, but they had them here from Cuba.
And what about you? Did you ever play in any of the Latin countries?
No, I never did.
Was that an experience that you wish that you would have had?
Well, not really, because from what I heard, I understand down in Mexico it was so hot down there, you know? Yeah.
People often talk about the spirit of the Negro Leagues. What does that mean? What was the spirit of the Negro Leagues?
Well, one thing, we knew that we sent a lot of players, including Jackie Robinson, to the majors. And Robinson, believe it or not, did more for baseball than anyone, more than Babe Ruth. And Robinson, Campanella, and Newcomb were going to barnstorm. And Robinson said, either I'll give you $500, rain or shine. So we split the money 3 ways. So they went for the $500 rain or shine. When they ended up, they played 30 games. We ended up in Mexico City. They had 30,000 people in Mexico City. The people that Robinson drew, ballparks that had never had the field. When Robinson came through barnstorming, they had to put restraint. They had people all on the outfield. And when Robinson got on the plane coming back to New York, he had 12 Pullman bags full of cash money.
Wow.
And that's when they opened up the Freedom National Bank in New York.
Wow.
So one thing, Robinson, not like most players, end up poor. He didn't end up poor.
Right.
And his family now, his wife and them, they got a multi-million-dollar Jackie Robinson Foundation.
Right.
And his son is over in Tanzania that has the coffee plantations.
We kind of talked about this earlier about the impact that the Negro Leagues had on their communities, but it was more than just the financial benefits to the community, just to give the people who live there a sense of pride and for kids and teenagers to see men and women who looked like them being successful in life and in business. That must have been a really great thing too.
Oh yeah, well see, my greatest thrill was when I would come home, and during that time the ladies, they would be out on the street talking, and when I'd be coming up the street, I could hear them say, "That's Bernice's boy. He been away to play baseball." And when I give, hey, come here. I said, "Yeah, remember I used to put diapers on you." I said, "Yeah." "Yeah, your mama proud of you. You been away to play ball, you know." And that made me feel good. Yeah.
When it came to the way that you guys might have been treated in some of the southern cities by white people or things like that, how did you not carry that anger or frustration onto the field with you? Like,
man, let me tell you, my anger, it's against the United States Army. Now, I'm drafted in the Army. Fort Benning, Georgia, I'm finishing jump school. So they pinned my wings on me. I'm proud. When we get ready to leave Fort Benning, going to Fort Bragg, we got to get in one car and the white boys in the other car till we got to Atlanta. But now when we got to Atlanta, see what had happened when they first started integration, interstate, you could be segregated. But once you crossed the state line, you had to integrate.
Mm-hmm.
See, so once we got to Atlanta, then we got on the Pullman, we integrated. And then I was playing on the football team at Fort Bragg, and we had a jive coach. Never forget, he was from Oklahoma, named Stratton. He got a bus for us to ride to Fort Dix instead of the plane. And then when we got to Maryland, we went into a restaurant where we had to eat on one side and the white players eat on the other side. And when we picked the captains, we had 3 black captains, so what he did, he sent a quarterback out with a captain. But when we got back to Fort Bragg, the guy went to the general and they fired him that next day. Yeah.
So how were you able to separate what you were going through off the field from what you were doing on the field so it wouldn't affect your play?
Well, see, one thing, when you're playing baseball, the only thing you worry about is that fastball and trying to hit that curveball. See, are you going somewhere and sit down and go to sleep? That's all you worry about, is trying to hit that ball. You didn't worry about all that other stuff. You didn't worry about that.
Mm-hmm. So you're 85 years old now, right?
Yeah, I'm 85. Yeah.
So that means that for 82 years of your life, you were not playing in the Negro Leagues. What made the 3 years that you were playing so special that here we are all these years later still talking about them?
See, one thing, that the Negro League, it was a part of our history. And we had teams that played in the 1800s. But now, what has happened now is that we dominate. You look at the NFL and you see teams loaded with it. You look at the NBA, you see. So now baseball, when we were segregated, we had our little recreation leagues where we had 15 teams. Now they cut it out. Mm-hmm. And the city got nerve enough to charge people to go to the rec centers. Yeah. So that kills that. And now they have the travel ball. I would have never been a baseball player. My mama had to pay some money to travel. Because what we used to do, everybody used the same glove and hit with the same bat. Now you got, if you can't have $1,200 for one of them travel teams, you can't play.
Mm-hmm. Bob Kendrick of the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum says that the story that they portray at the museum is so important because it's not about the adversity, but rather what you guys did to overcome that adversity. By the point you began playing in the Negro Leagues, the color line had already been broken. The battle for recognition and legitimacy had been won, and it was clear that black baseball players were not only good enough to play, but were some of the best baseball players in the world. You know, we went over that list earlier. If you could do it all over again, knowing what you know now about what you had to go through and all of the hardships that you faced, would you do it all over again?
See, that's a question that you can't turn back time. So I got to deal the way it is. What I did it the best I could. Now, I ain't know what I could did, if I shoulda, woulda. Got to deal with what happened. Now, whatever it said I did, that's it. Mm-hmm. Can't be changed.
Are you glad that you went through what you went through?
I'm not glad, but I mean, I didn't have any choice.
Right.
I didn't have any choice. But I'm not bitter.
Right, yeah.
Because, hey, I live to be 85. A
yeah.
lot of people don't live to be 85.
Absolutely. No, it doesn't seem like you're bitter at all. And it's surprising to me.
Yeah, but you know, if you carry that bitterness in it, that's what kills a lot of people. You trying to be bitter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In 2021, you received a lifetime invitation from Major League Baseball to attend every All-Star game moving forward. Your first chance to go was last year in Denver when you went on an all-expenses-paid trip with a guest. Who did you bring with you, and what was your favorite memory from that trip?
My grandson and my daughter, we all traveled.
And what were some of your favorite things that you did on that trip?
With that trip, I tell you what, meeting C.C. Sebastian.
Yeah.
Yeah, meeting C.C. Sebastian, yeah.
Cool. The fact that you were at that All-Star game all came about because of your friend Pedro Sierra. Tell us a little bit about Pedro and how you two became friends.
Well, he was born in Cuba, but then he served in the United States Army.
And he's a former Negro League player as well,
yeah,
correct?
And he's a Cuban.
Right.
But the strange thing about Pedro played up into the 70s. He played about 10 years in organized ball.
Wow.
Yeah. Pedro and I, we do car shows together.
You know, they say men and women who were in war together have a special unspoken bond with one another. People say if you weren't there, you'd never understand. But if you went through it together, or even if you went through it separately, that you have that shared experience that only a few select people have ever had. Did you have that same bond with the people who also played in the Negro Leagues?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Is there some sort of network where you guys all talk to each other and keep in touch, or is it all kind of just up to you?
Well, a few of us that's left, Larry LeGrand, he lives in Roanoke. I talked with him a couple of weeks ago, and I lost one of my good friends, Ken Free.
Yeah.
Yeah, he passed a couple of weeks ago.
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
When you were growing up, or even when you were playing, could you have ever envisioned a Major League Baseball that looks like the one that we have today?
Well, baseball hasn't changed that much, really.
The sport hasn't really changed, but the makeup of the league is certainly different than when it was in 1935.
Yeah, well, see, but what they do now is just like they do with cars and stuff. They import the players. Mm-hmm. They spend $10 million down in the Dominican Republic for academy down there. Mm-hmm. They feed them. They give them health care. They spend that money down there.
So do you think that Major League Baseball should fund academies in American inner cities?
Yeah, they got a couple of academies that they start. Mm-hmm. But see now, they could go to some of these areas and do academies there, and you had less crime, and that's a chance to get out of poverty.
Yeah.
Yeah. And a lot of the Black Players Association, they're reaching out now to the youngsters.
Mm-hmm.
Play Alliance here.
Right, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Started by Cameron Maben, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. What is your proudest baseball achievement?
One of my proudest is to be at Harvard Park. My picture's on the shrine, to be put in the shrine at the ballpark.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've been honored a handful of times by local teams and had celebrations in your honor and things like that. What has that meant to you in the past 15, 20 years when all those things have been happening for you?
Well, I appreciate it. I can't say I don't appreciate it, you know, but it's been great. And I gotta show you this. And this is what I cherish. I can go to any baseball park in the country with that.
Yeah, lifetime pass.
With the guests.
Pretty amazing. What are you most proud of in life?
I'm proud that I got a family, my daughter, my grandson. That's what I'm proud of.
Yeah. Is there anything else that we didn't touch on that you want to talk about, or anybody in particular you want to mention or tell a story about or anything like that?
To talk about things that happen in the Negro League, I guess we'd be here tomorrow talking, you know.
Well, I can free up my schedule if you want.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, but I can remember 57 when we with Dismute, we played. Mobile was in the league, and they owner was a little shaky, and we were playing them, supposed to play them for a week, and Dismute said, "Look, they haven't seen the owner to get paid. Now, if they go home, we don't have anyone to play for a week." So we were getting that $2 a day. So what we got to do, we had to take one player and give him $1, that $2. And when we got the hotel, we take the mattress off the bed. We sleep on the mattress, let them sleep on the box spring.
Uh-huh.
So we carried them a whole week, you know. So that's how close, you know, we were.
Right. Don, you've heard your grandfather tell stories for the past X number of years. Is there any particular story that you love that he tells?
It's so many stories I could tell, Justin, like even with the All-Star weekend, him and my Uncle Pedro, because I was the first one to see in the lobby CC Sabathia. So they trying to act all Hollywood, like they don't want to meet him at first. I'm like, "Hey, Granddad, there go CC Sabathia." He like, "What?" So I'm walking. I'm ahead of them. They end up walking past me. Like, if you could have clocked them, I'm like, he might have ran a four flat 40 trying to see CC Sabathia. Like, yeah. that was another funny moment right there. And then like, but it was just a dope experience.
See, CC had played at Kingston, and the lady that he stayed with, when him and Manny Ramirez signed a big contract, CC went back to Kingston, gave her a nice piece of money. Yeah. And that's why I wanted to see him, you know, to tell him that I had talked with her.
I just wanted to piggyback on, too, like, just the former MLB players from Mr. Sabathia, Mr. LaTroy Hawkins, and Pat Mahomes Sr., like, just them giving back into the to the black community with the baseball and the player alliance. I think it's a real beautiful thing. And then Pat Mahomes Sr., I want to say the Hank Aaron Invitational, he invited us down there coming up. I want to say it's in Atlanta. We did an interview, so they treat the Negro League players and the former players like royalty. So I could say like that was a other like amazing thing, seeing like they was more honored to meet my grandfather and my Uncle Pedro than we were to meet them. And it's like we in the likes of Ken Griffey Jr. and I said CC Sabathia and all them, like the greats. Like, and for me, like those was like the gold standard players. Like, just growing up and watching like the players that I did know. So like just seeing them give him his flowers is a beautiful thing. And then like my grandfather was hitting on giving back into the community. I think that's a real big thing, because like he said in the countries in the Dominican Republic and all that, they had that pipeline. And I feel like with baseball, with them putting that money into like the areas like my granddad said in Chicago and all that, it'll really do something special. Because like even watching Tim Anderson, like I love his game. Like that game that he hit that walk-off home run in the cornfield, like that was my first like baseball game that I watched on TV where I sat there glued. I'm like, man, that was like just seeing how the game is progressing, and it's like it's still potential where players can, especially African American players, because we get kind of distracted where basketball and football is the main outlet, and then it's like you got a player like Tim Anderson where he started playing baseball when he was in 11th grade and he was a basketball player, so he transitioned, and then like it's wild. So I'm like players like him, and then CC Sabathia, like those the gatekeepers, like telling the story, and especially with the Negro League history, because it's so untold. Like, and honestly, growing up, not too many people knew about the Negro League, especially my age. So it's like I be finding it funny now, like people coming up to me, like especially my friends, they'll be like, your granddad, I ain't know he a legend. I'm like, bro, he used to come to our school all the time. So it's like now that he gets the recognition nationally, like it's like a beautiful thing. So
seeing the way that players like CC Sabathia and you said LaTroy Hawkins and Cameron Mabe and all these guys who are included in the Players Alliance and doing the things that they're doing, I think they have the sense of history and know that they were able to have the careers that they had and make the millions of dollars that they made because of players like your grandfather and the trail that they blazed to allow everybody to come after them. So they might not have gotten the recognition during their playing careers that they deserve, but hopefully they're getting it now. And for a lot of people, it might have been a little bit too little too late, or maybe they've already passed away and never had the chance to really be properly recognized. And I think that's why guys like CC Sabathia are doing everything they can to make sure that the ones we still have left, like you said, let's give them their flowers while they're still here to take them.
Just like this ride with my grandfather, like having a walking history book, it's a real beautiful feeling. It's like now me being old, I appreciate my heritage even more, and just like the legacy, because I always knew he was a legend, because like out here walking with him, everybody, hey, Sam Allen, they'll start chopping up with him, or they'll tell me, oh, you Sam Allen's grandson, I heard about you, so it's like just upholding the legacy, and then just being his little PR man. It's another just like a fun ride, because it's just like he done taught me so much, and then just to see him get his flowers, because he's so humble and he doesn't ask for much, and he's not the type to brag about what he did, because that's one thing I always admired. He always instilled in me. He was like, if you gotta brag and talk about what you do, then you won't that good. So it's like that's one thing I look at. It's like he lets his legacy and his impact on people speak for itself, and I feel like that's something that's real important. I even value that, because it's like the money and all that, it doesn't mean nothing to him. It's his impact, like I said, on the people, and then what he can do for the game as far as passing it down to the youngsters and letting them know, like, hey, you can be great, and then just being a pioneer of history is just a beautiful feeling.
Well, thank you both very much. I really appreciate your time, and hope that this was as meaningful for you as it was for me. Can't tell you how much I appreciate it and how humbled I am to be sitting here with you. So thank you again for inviting me into your home. It really means a lot. Appreciate it very much.
That's it.
Awesome. All right, now it's time for a segment called What'd You Think, Mom?, where we talk to my mom, who just listened to the interview with me, and we ask her what she thinks. This is my real, actual mom. Her name is Lori, but I've always just called her Mom. Can you say something to prove that you are my mom?
So we have this birthday party set up for your 16th birthday. It's a big deal. But we needed to move the time of the party because the high school football team was in the semifinals for the state championship, and you were going to go. And so we started the party at noon. You left and went to the game, and all of us stayed and ate cake. So they won. Awesome. They're going to make it to the finals the following weekend. So that was a Saturday. And on Sunday, you and I went out and made these huge wooden signs painted in the school colors and plastered them on our front lawn in the snow, because it was Chicago, cheering on the football team to state. And a special shout out to Bobby Giannini, who was our neighbor and the quarterback. Mm-hmm. And that's who we were. Didn't matter what sport necessarily. We were a sports-minded family, and sports came before birthday parties. It was like you needed to be at the moment, and it was like, yeah, we get it. Mm-hmm. Go.
Yeah. Bobby drove me to school every day that year in his Mustang, which was awesome. And in the state finals, is the coldest I've ever been in my life. The game was in Champaign at the University of Illinois Stadium. And it was, the week after Thanksgiving or whatever. So, late November or early December, 3.5 hour long game. And because we were 8A played the latest game. So it's completely dark. It's late in the year. There's no heaters in this outdoor stadium.
Right. And there aren't too many trees around Champaign, Illinois.
I have never been that cold in my life. The only thing that even approached it is when we went to the Blackhawks game at Soldier Field.
And we were ready for that. We didn't even go in for the intermissions on that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what'd you think of the Sam Allen interview?
What a gift that you had the opportunity to sit down and speak with this man, the amazing person he is today, an eyewitness to some of the greatest players who ever played the game, and that he's 85 years old and speaking to you with such recall. Mm-hmm. I don't have that skill set of being able to tell you what I hit the third time I was up in the game from 1947. Mm-hmm. But when I'm listening to him tell the stories and his experiences, relating stories about the men he was playing with or against, I just kept thinking, I need to get to Kansas City and get to the Negro League's Baseball Museum. From the very first pic that you sent me when you went the first time, where they have the statues in the positions for the appropriate players, I wanted to go immediately. Yeah. And it's still high on my list. And this is why. The eyewitnesses are fading fast.
To me, this interview and this type of interview is the essence of what I want this podcast to be. Right. Is just preserving the stories of these people, men and women from all different associations to the sport. Obviously, Sam was a player, but we are going to have interviews with people who weren't players, whether they were in the front office or part of the game day crews or the ballpark experience. Those stories are important, and if you don't capture them and preserve them, they get lost. And I think that is what the Negro League's Baseball Museum does a great job of doing. Is, they knew starting in 1990 when they opened the museum, we're going to start losing these guys,
right?
And getting those stories down and videotaping them when they could and audio recording them when they could. That's one of the things that Bob Kendrick is great at, is telling those stories and listening to his Black Diamonds podcast. That's all that podcast is just telling stories. And what else can you ask for?
That league was so critical to the history of our country, not only from the standpoint of baseball, but the barriers they were breaking all over the place. Listening to him lightly, I'll say, speak to some of the challenges that they had when we know what those challenges really were. Those men went through all that and persevered. It was very ugly. It was a very ugly time in our country, and you have to respect the past, and the only way you can is if you know what actually occurred.
Mm-hmm. It's so interesting to me that we're talking about things that happened 65 years ago, and Sam, like you said, could still remember the names of the hotels that they stayed at,
right,
and the names of the women who own those hotels. And I think, he kind of downplayed a little bit how hard things must have been on the road and being a black person traveling in America at that time, or just living in America at that time. But that kind of showed me how important those safe places were to them, and how big of an impact they had on the experience of the players, that here we are 65 years later and he still remembers the woman's name who gave him a safe place to sleep that night.
Yes, and you know what? If you want to get a feel for that, go to Memphis, where he was based, and the Lorraine Motel, which is where Martin Luther King was assassinated. That is now a historic site and a museum. But if you are just looking at the hotel, take away the Martin Luther King aspect and just look at this hotel, you see what it was, where it was. It's among warehouses. It's not in the center of the city. But Sam made a comment that when you stayed in a hotel like that, you could have Nat King Cole sleeping in the room next to you.
Well, he started that story by saying, the problem was next door to you might be Nat King Cole. I never found out what the problem was about that.
The guy's singing all night long,
It's Nat King Cole.
That's true.
Sing. Go for it, buddy.
But that was absolutely the way it was.
Yeah.
And so, for example, the Lorraine Motel, they knew they could get a fantastic meal. It was home cooked, but they were safe. They were among friends, and everyone was relaxed because it was a safe spot. But to think that that was where they had to go. Mm-hmm. Don't even get me started on the gas station situations. When you asked who his idol was, and right away he said Willie Mays, and of course that was such a great pick. I think you asked him why, what in particular, and he said he played full out. Mm-hmm. And then you translate what was going on in those Negro Leagues. They were playing a completely different game than what was going on in Major League Baseball at the time. So when you have the Negro League players that are the first 5 guys coming in, but even just Jackie Robinson and Larry Doby coming in at the beginning, they're playing a game that these white spectators have never seen. So the white spectators are standing up out of their seats, grabbing their hair, going, "Oh my God, I can't believe what I just think I saw." Mm-hmm. They're doing bunting, they're running, they're stealing bases, they're doing all these things. They do the shadow ball thing, which is an optical illusion right in front of your eyes, and the analogy to the Harlem Globetrotters and their routines that get the crowd going. Mm-hmm. Well, that's going on the field. It must have been a fantastic show and so much talent, because you can't do that unless you have talent.
Yeah, absolutely. And the white owners of the baseball teams in those cities started realizing, well, when my white team is on the road, the stadium is empty, and money is money. If I can have a Negro League team come play in this empty stadium when my team's on the road, I can charge them rent, essentially. You know, they can rent out this stadium for me. And then they started realizing the impacts that the financial aspect was having on the community and how much money could be made. And it opened up a whole lot of different possibilities. But the fact that the Negro Leagues were able to self-sustain and have this league and have this entertainment for themselves was something I wish I could have seen in person.
Wait, so you're saying it came down to money?
As it often does.
Yeah. That he was a paratrooper at Fort Bragg, that is something. Mm-hmm. That, again, speaks to who he was and the intellect he had and the daily training. That just kind of slipped off his tongue. Mm-hmm. It was so disappointing, though, for me to hear when you asked, how did he handle the disrespect and the prejudice and whatever as a Negro League player. You're a person of stature within the black community, but on the road, he's a Negro. And he said it wasn't that, it was the way the Army treated him. Mm-hmm. That was very disappointing to me. And I thought he spoke very eloquently when he said, "You pin wings on me at Fort Bennett, and by the time I get to Fort Bragg,
I've got to sit on a different bus.
Or in a car with 3 guys because we can't even be on the bus." Mm-hmm. Not acceptable.
Yeah. But again, I want to hear those stories. And
absolutely.
I'm glad that he felt comfortable enough to share them with me and that we get to listen to that together, as awful as it is to hear. I'd rather know it, and now we can hopefully learn from it and move forward.
You have to know it. You have to hear it, because otherwise you don't know. Mm-hmm. And it is not acceptable. So going back to the high school years, and you asked, do they have great coaches? Because you're looking at all the numbers that the players are coming up with. Mm-hmm. And he says, no, it wasn't great coaches. It was that they didn't have cell phones. Mm-hmm. All they had to do was play ball or mm-hmm. be outside.
But I think he even downplayed that, because he mentioned Claude Cousins and Walt Lundy were his friends who also went to Booker T. Washington. And mm-hmm. the kids at the other high schools didn't have cell phones either. So just because Sam and his buddies didn't have cell phones and all they did all day was play baseball, what do you think everybody else did?
So, but do you mean other black high schools, or do you mean the white high schools?
Any high school. Cell phones didn't exist back then.
Right,
so,
no, I know.
So my point is, what made Booker T. Washington such a factory for great athletes? Back to how good his memory is all these years later, the fact that he could recall the name of the black trainer for the Richmond Colts. Not even the team that he was on. It was just another person who participated in the Piedmont League, Zip Brooks.
Yeah.
I promise you, we're the only podcast in America who has a Zip Brooks mention. I love that stuff.
Yeah.
Like, those are the people who you don't want forgotten. And you can go online and look up Zip Brooks' name, and you'll see some newspaper articles, but who's talking about that, who's giving the importance of who that guy was and what he meant. Jacob mentioned it in one of our previous episodes. You might think you know a ton about baseball, and you probably do, but you'll never know everything. And one of my favorite things about this podcast is the more people you talk to, the more times you're going to hear names like Zip Brooks and names like Joe Louis, who was a former catcher for the Hilldales that Sam mentioned, played in the 1924 Negro League World Series, and then was the promoter who set up these barnstorming games and the military games with Willie Mays at Fort Eustis. Those are people who are important to the story as well, and they might not be remembered 60 years later, 65 years later, or whatever it may be, but they made things happen back then. And so I think it's important to remember them and talk about them and recognize them. Right.
Talking about the barnstorming games, the story that he told about the one with Willie Mays stepping in when Don Newcomb was MIA. Mm-hmm. So Mays hits the single and then proceeds to steal second base, third base, home, but does one of the catches that makes him famous. And he's playing that game in,
1952. So this is before he had made the
Right.
1954 World Series Game 1 catch.
So
He was just practicing because he knew one day.
That is exactly what I wrote. I know you're making a joke, but when the world sees him make the catch, they're thinking, oh my God, like that came out of nowhere.
What a lucky moment.
Not really.
Right.
We just found out today, he was practicing. It was
Right.
part of his repertoire.
It's like when Michael Jordan would make a half-court shot
Right.
in a game, and it's like, oh, what a lucky shot.
Yeah.
That's not luck. If he does it one time in his career, sure, maybe it's luck.
Right.
But if he can do it 6 out of 10 times,
Yeah.
at a certain point, it's not luck. It's because that's what they're practicing. Because they know in a moment, you're going to need to pull that out, and you need to be ready. And that's what Willie Mays was doing. He knew the closer in I can play, and Tris Speaker used to play like this too. The closer in I can play in center field, I can maybe throw guys out at first base if they hit a sharp line drive back up the middle. I know I'm fast enough that if they hit it over my head, I can run back and get it. It's going to be a double anyway, so I can still hold them to a double, but maybe I can get a couple of these outs, or maybe I can sneak in behind a runner who's on second base and straying off a little bit too far, and the pitcher can turn around and pick him off because I'm there.
Right.
And the runner only sees second base and shortstop, and he's like, oh, they're in their positions, I can stray a little bit further. That's the type of baseball that the Negro Leagues were playing. It was an exciting
Right.
things that you weren't used to seeing. We're fast, we're strong, we're outsmarting you.
Right. We're playing strategically and taking every advantage that we can possibly come up with.
And entertaining you.
Absolutely.
Hitting a single and then stealing 3 consecutive bases and walking off the field like, you guys just got your show. I'm going home now.
Unbelievable.
How about just the fact that he got to play with Willie Mays and Satchel Paige?
Yeah. Okay, that's exactly what we want to talk about next. Because the conversation went to the point of who was the best. Did he think Mays was the best? And he said yes. But the conversation then went to the move from the Polo Grounds to Candlestick and the wind and what he lost in that transition. What he lost because, those 2 prime years at the beginning, he's in the Army.
Yeah, he wins the Rookie of the Year in 1951 and then misses essentially 2 full seasons.
Yeah.
Comes back in 54. They win the World Series. Imagine what he would have done in those 2 seasons.
Right.
Forget the extra home runs that he missed because of the wind and the strange ballpark in San Francisco after they moved. He missed 70 home runs minimum just because he wasn't playing Major League Baseball in 52 and 53. So he ended his career with 660. There's no doubt he's a 700 guy. I think he's closing in on 750 if he plays his full career and doesn't have to deal with the wind and stuff like that.
Yeah. And then go to Satchel Paige. Just a phenomenal athlete. But the longevity, even though he had a big gap in the end years, he's starting in 1927. He comes back after a gap and plays in 1965. Most people don't even stay in any job that long, let alone playing every single day. It's just mind-boggling.
And pitching, not just playing.
Right.
You can hit for 50 years, but can you pitch?
Successfully pitch.
Right. Yeah.
How about Dizzy Dismukes, not only as the manager and strategist for what was happening within the league and the team, but also he was a submarine pitcher. And then I think you mentioned that he trained Carl Mays. Of course, we know Carl Mays from A Day of Infamy. The pitch that killed was delivered by Carl Mays as a submarine pitcher.
Yeah. Sam mentioned that Dizzy Dismukes taught Sam how to pick up the rotation of a pitch when he was batting and how to think about baseball, not just how to play. And it's funny, we heard Bobby Richardson talk about Ralph Houck and Bill Dickey, who each taught him those same things. So it's funny how the great coaches in someone's life are such important figures who get remembered forever by those guys. It may be a baseball lesson in the moment, but sometimes those are life lessons that those guys carry with them forever. And sitting next to somebody on a long bus ride and having these conversations, that's what you remember 60 years later. It's not a coincidence that the great baseball coaches are also sometimes the great life coaches who these guys respect forever.
It is like turning a light bulb on. It just changes their perspective, how they look at things on the field and off. Definite mentors. But yet, as Sam said, you thought he was a preacher when you talked to him. He said he was real smooth and a fine fellow. He'd be the guy that they'd send out to talk to parents to recruit. Some things haven't changed in that way, have they?
But another guy who I think played an important role, and I'm glad we got his name mentioned, was Bob Mitchell, who gave Sam his phone number in case Sam got cut from the Reds in that 1957 spring training. And if Sam did get cut, Bob said, hey, give me a call. You can come try out for the Monarchs. And luckily, Sam decided, I will take your number, even though he thought, I'm going to make this team. I don't need your number.
Right.
Well, he did need it, and thank God he took it, because then he became a Negro League player, and all these years later, here we are talking to him. And if it weren't for Bob Mitchell saying, I like the way you play, if you want to be a part of this team, you can make this team, who knows what would have happened and how the rest of Sam's life and career would have played out.
Exactly.
It would have gone differently.
Exactly. So basically giving a hand out, helping to pull him up, right? You guys talked about how the guys who made it into the major leagues, when they were together with the Negro League players, they were doing the same thing in terms of showing them respect and giving them their props and
just making their life easier.
That's exactly
because they knew.
Those are exactly the words I was going to say.
You know, like he said, paying for steak dinner sometimes,
right,
because they just signed a big major league contract, and we can't necessarily afford that on $2 a day per diem.
Right.
But those guys were there. They were in those shoes, so they know every once in a while a nice dinner is going to make life on the road easier.
Absolutely.
And I think that's the part that was so important. Yeah, the friendships are cool and the conversations are cool, and what's it like to pitch against this guy, or what's it like to hit against this guy, or what's it like to play in this stadium. But a nice dinner every once in a while is pretty cool too. Right.
Basically acknowledging, I remember what it was like. I know what you guys are going through, and there but for the grace of God go I. So definitely.
But also showing the community aspect of it, that someday it's going to be your turn to pay it forward. And these guys did that and respected that. Donovan talked about this towards the end, where guys like CeCe Sabathia and LaTroy Hawkins and Pat Mahomes Sr. and Cameron Maben and Curtis Granderson and all these guys who are part of the Players Alliance or not, they know that they are standing on the shoulders of giants.
Exactly.
And if it weren't for players like Sam Allen or Satchel Paige or Dizzy Dismukes or any of these guys, Rube Foster, they wouldn't be where they are, and they wouldn't have the opportunities to donate money because they wouldn't have earned that money. And so I think that's a strong thread throughout history, is that they understand you got to pay it forward because the next generation needs you.
Right. So his favorite city to play was New York, and his favorite ballpark was Ebbets Field. The first thing he said, though, when he said Ebbets Field, and you asked why, was his uncle lived in New York City and he could come watch him play. And that kind of slid under the radar, because then the next comment was about he had a home run in Ebbets Field. So then going forward a little bit, when he said the largest roar he ever heard was when he hit that home run. Think how he felt to have his uncle in the stands watching that.
His feet never touched the ground while he was rounding those bases, I promise you.
And what did the uncle feel like watching it?
Right.
That must have been a moment.
Well, also, how about the fact that now we have spoken with somebody who played at Ebbets Field?
Right.
That's cool.
Yeah.
You know, we talked with Bobby Richardson, but he was an American League player, so he played at Yankee Stadium and Fenway Park and, you know, Old Comiskey Park, but this was before interleague play. So he wasn't playing at most of the other National League parks unless they met those teams in the World Series. So just to have this first-hand interaction with people who played in these old stadiums, because that's something that we've heard and read in books, is that players loved playing at Ebbets Field and fans loved going to games at Ebbets Field because especially the second deck was so close over the field. It felt like you were on top of the players. And it was cool to hear him say that. You know, I didn't prod him for that. He came out with that. So the fact that that is his memory of Ebbets Field, it's like, oh, okay, cool. That is a real memory that people have, and it is true.
Talking about the condition of different fields from A to Z. That kind of says it all. Pretty comprehensive comment. But sometimes your skin is getting ripped up when you're sliding or when you're making a play that gets you on the ground. In that same part of the conversation, he was also talking about how you pitched one day and then the next day you were out in a position. That's what made them so versatile. What these players were going through in the Negro Leagues, you didn't necessarily see that in the other league. Just amazing how much their skill sets were developed every single day they were on the field in all different ways.
Well, and the white major league teams could carry a couple more players on their roster than the Negro Leagues teams could. So that was kind of my point in even bringing about that line of questioning to him, is you guys had to play multiple positions because you didn't have a 12-person bullpen.
Right.
You had a 15 or 16-man roster, and 8 people are playing in the field.
And you might have to have one of them drive the bus.
Right. Ted Double Duty Radcliffe got his nickname because he would catch the first game of a doubleheader and then turn around and pitch the second game. Think of that. How tired you must be after catching a game, and then you're going to go out and throw the next one? And throw a no-hitter, potentially? That's how he got that nickname, Double Duty, but he was not the only guy who played multiple positions and pitched and did other things. That was kind of par for the course.
But can you imagine the advantage of catching the first game and then being the pitcher against that same team the second game? That's just brilliant.
Yeah.
When Sam mentioned how rigorous the timetable of games in 1 week could be, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, a game each gets you at 4 games, a doubleheader on Friday, again on Saturday, now you're at 8, and sometimes 4 on Sunday. The first thing I thought of as a Chicago girl was Ernie Banks, let's play 2 or 12.
Yeah. Let's play 2 doubleheaders. No, thank you.
It makes so much sense now with him just reeling it off like piece of cake. Let's play 2.
Yeah, it's half as many games as I'm used to playing.
Right.
Yeah, unfathomable. 4 games in one day.
Oh my God.
Even as a travel team, you don't
Right.
play 4 games in one day. And you're playing professional baseball against legitimate competition in 2 different cities. That was the other part.
Yes.
You play a doubleheader in one city in the morning,
Yeah.
drive the bus to another city, and then play another doubleheader that night. And the fact that these guys weren't getting injured.
Yeah.
You know, he said if you did get injured, they just sent you home.
Mm-hmm. So
maybe
you
they're-
weren't injured.
Right. So maybe they're playing through injuries. You know,
Right.
I'm sure they were. You can't
Yeah.
go through a season without getting injured, but just the conditioning that these guys must have been in and the recovery. I mean, I can't imagine a team or players today going through what they went through and coming out unscathed.
Even if you just set aside the numbers of games, and that alone is overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
But then you throw in, where are they sleeping? On a bus that is not a coach bus with a bathroom in the back of it, or cushy seats, or overhead lighting, or air conditioning.
Or just on a mattress or just on a box spring because they need to give half their meal money to the other team.
Right.
Like the living conditions might not have always been great. And I
Yeah.
think that, again, that might be why he does remember the names of the hotel owners and the nice
Yeah.
hotels, because those days and nights were important.
Right.
That was a respite in the middle of a rigorous schedule.
Mentally and physically,
Yeah.
a respite. Another way their versatility was developed was apparently a very generous strike zone.
Well, that's how these games only lasted 2 hours. Let's go. Everything's a strike.
Oh my gosh.
When you play pickup basketball on a court outside, the phrase is no blood, no foul.
Right?
Okay.
Yep.
If it didn't kill you, it's the strike.
Yeah. Who needs the umpire? He's just
Right.
basically another body to stop it so the catcher doesn't have to go so far back to retrieve a missed ball.
And that's why I asked him, does he remember any of the umpires' personalities? Because as umpires, they weren't necessarily good or bad.
Right.
It was,
They were
you
present.
fun?
Yeah.
And there's an umpire named Bob Motley, who is a real outspoken guy, energetic guy. And his grandson, Byron, just came out with the documentary, The League. So if you haven't had a chance to see that, definitely worth watching. But that's the connection, is that his grandfather was a Negro Leagues umpire. And not just a umpire, he was a great one.
Mm-hmm. So basically with conditions like that, with that open of a strike zone, they basically could hit anything.
Mm-hmm.
And now they're going into major leagues and sure, go ahead and paint the corner.
Right. You might as well be throwing the ball right down the middle.
Right.
And that's why when you see video clips of guys like Willie Mays or Roberto Clemente swinging at these quote unquote bad pitches, or even in modern days, Vladimir Guerrero was known for this, but they're so used to coming up in these situations where you just got to swing at everything that at a certain point you just get used to swinging at everything. You can hit whatever comes your way. You're ready for it.
Right. Josh Gibson, I like that he hit a ball into the train in Portsmouth and it ends up in Pittsburgh. That's a pretty,
Yeah.
I don't know how you score that.
People say that's the furthest home run ever hit.
Yeah. When Donovan was sharing some of his perspective, first of all, what a gift for him.
Yeah.
And vice versa. You could hear the emotion in Sam's voice when he talked about what is his greatest accomplishment, his daughter and his grandson. And that's great. Really, that's what it comes down to. But his first story that Donovan wanted to share was how excited Sam and Uncle Pedro were to see Cece Sabathia.
Right.
That told you everything you need to know.
But also the fact that Sam clarified, he didn't mean it this way, but it comes out this way. I don't care about how good of a pitcher you are. I don't care about how much money you made. You took care of the woman who took care of you when you were coming up. That's what I wanted to tell you about. That I know that happened, and I need you to know we all know. We appreciate that. That's why he ran past Donovan to go tell him,
Yeah,
I see you. And what more do you need to say about that interaction?
right.
But also just thanks again to Donovan for being the middleman and setting up this interview for us. Wouldn't have been able to have this conversation without Donovan's help, and the fact that he sat there at the table with us that day and helped the technological aspects of this interview and making sure that he had the headphones on because his grandfather didn't. So we were making sure that the microphone was pointed properly at Sam while he was talking and sitting in his recliner. So yeah, Donovan was a huge help, and real glad to have met him and become friends with him.
When you have someone special like that with an elderly person, it's a guardian angel. And without Donovan, these stories would be lost because Sam wouldn't be able to be out there, even without a microphone, just being out there and the logistics of moving around and being places and being present, using that gold card in his wallet.
Yeah.
It's a gift to both of them and a gift to us now as well because we are the beneficiaries of the interview.
And Donovan also runs Sam's social media presence. Normally at the end of interviews, I ask people, how can people follow you on social media?
You didn't ask Sam that?
We didn't have a chance to go over that. But I do want to tell people, if you want to follow Sam on Instagram or on social media, it's Sam Allen NLB. So Sam, S-A-M, Allen, A-L-L-E-N, and NLB like Negro League Baseball. So Sam Allen NLB on Instagram. And Donovan runs that account. He's great. He posts stuff all the time, whether it's Sam and Pedro going to card shows or being at baseball games or whatever the case may be, speaking engagements. There's always new posts, always new stories happening. So it's a good follow, and it's a good way to keep up with what's going on in their lives.
Fantastic.
Thanks again to Sam and to Donovan. And I feel like we bring up Ted and Edward Holstrom in a lot of our episodes, but they were also part of this too. They were at the interview that day, and Ted put us in touch initially with Donovan. So that's how this all came to be, and wouldn't have been able to do it without them either. So
great tip.
Thanks
Thank you
for them. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Mom.
Thanks, Dan.
Okay, so that's it. In the introduction of this episode, I mentioned how there are a handful of ways for you to follow the podcast online. In addition to liking, subscribing, and giving My Baseball History a 5-star rating on your favorite podcast app, please make sure you're also following us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, where we are at Shoeless Podcast on each platform. By following us there, you'll get some bonus content throughout the month, and you'll be able to interact with us to let us know what you think of the show. You can also sign up for Clearing the Bases, our brand new email newsletter, by heading to shoelesspodcast.substack.com. We'll be publishing 2 newsletters a month, which will allow us to talk about lots of things we don't normally talk about on the show. I'll use that space to talk about the podcast, of course, but I'll also use it to write about baseball road trips I go on, to publish research I do, and to speak on current events in baseball, all of which are things I don't really do in episodes of My Baseball History. If you have questions about the podcast or research you'd like to contribute to a future newsletter, submit something through the contact form on our website, or email us at shoelesspodcast@gmail.com. If you have ideas for guests you'd like us to talk to on the podcast, send us your list. If you know current or former baseball players, managers, broadcasters, or journalists who you can help us get in touch with, or if you are one, let's talk. During our interview, Sam and I talked about a couple of his teammates at Booker T. Washington High School, Claude Cousins and Walt Lundy. We spoke about them briefly, but I wanted to pay each of them the respect they deserve in this episode too. Claude Henry Cousins Jr. was born August 7, 1938. Claude played for the Norfolk Blue Comets, the Norfolk Western Giants, and the Norfolk Tigers from 1952 to 1955, meaning he started playing semi-pro ball at the age of 13. From 1955 through 1957, he pitched and was a utility player for the Indianapolis Clowns and the New York Black Yankees, barnstorming all over the US and Canada. Claude married Evelyn Ann Welch in 1958, and they traveled together during his military career. He eventually became a staff sergeant for the U.S. Army serving in Vietnam. Claude passed away on March 2, 2005, at the age of 66. Walter Lundy was born December 10, 1935. Walt was a 3-sport star at Booker T. Washington High School, lettering in baseball, football, and basketball. During his senior year, Walt played shortstop for the mighty Bookers. He was scouted by the Dodgers and the Pirates, trying out for Pittsburgh as an 18-year-old in 1954. The following year, he signed with the Chicago White Sox and played at multiple levels within their farm system over the next 3 years. The White Sox released Walt in 1957, but he quickly signed with the Indianapolis Clowns and spent the year barnstorming with them and the New York Black Yankees. The Indianapolis Clowns were founded in 1938 by Sid Pollock when the Miami Giants became the Ethiopian Clowns. The Clowns barnstormed all over the United States and Canada before entering the Negro American League in 1943 as the Cincinnati Clowns. In 1946, the team became known as the Indianapolis Clowns, which is the name that would stick. The Clowns were the first professional baseball team to hire a female player to a long-term contract that was not voided soon after. Toni Stone was the first in 1953 when she batted .243 as the team's starting second baseman. Mamie Peanut Johnson and Connie Morgan both signed the following year. Women also served as umpires for the team, notably former Chicago model Nancy Miller, who was the first female umpire in professional baseball. The Clowns had a number of great male players too, including Goose Tatum of Harlem Globetrotter fame and Buster Haywood. There were also a handful of stars who played for the Clowns before reaching the white major leagues, including John Wyatt, Paul Casanova, Hal King, and Clarence Choo Choo Coleman. Undeniably though, the most famous player ever for the Indianapolis Clowns was the shortstop of the 1952 team, Henry Aaron. By the early 1950s, all of the best black ball players were signing to play for white major league organizations. Ed Hammond, the owner of the Indianapolis Clowns, felt that not only could the team make more money barnstorming, but that barnstorming may be the only way to financially survive in black baseball. The Clowns dropped out of the Negro American League in 1955 to concentrate on barnstorming full-time. And it did prove to be financially more successful, with the Clowns' barnstorming tour able to sustain all the way through the 1988 season before finally ending after a handful of games in 1989. When the Clowns were barnstorming during the 1950s and 60s, they carried two teams. The Indianapolis Clowns, obviously, and their opposing team. That was an idea that the Clowns borrowed from basketball's Harlem Globetrotters, who traveled with the Washington Generals, so they always had someone to play. But unlike the Globetrotters, the games that the Clowns played against the opponents they brought with them were actually competitive. The rationale for bringing two teams was that not all of the places the Clowns booked to play had a strong local team. But, especially in black baseball, the paying fans always expected a good game. The name of the Clowns' opponents changed a handful of times over the years. New York Stars, New York Royals, the Baltimore Stars, and the Georgia Flyers, just to name a few. But by far the most used team name over the years and the most popular was the New York Black Yankees. Fans immediately recognized the Yankees name due to the success of the New York Yankees of the white major leagues. And surely, fans thought, a team with the name Yankees must have been a worthy opponent for the world-famous Indianapolis Clowns. Fans had no issue spending money on a ticket for what was destined to be a great game. Negro League veteran Sylvester Snead managed the 1957 Indianapolis Clowns team. The Clowns included a good mix of Negro League veterans and young ball players. Choo Choo Coleman, who we mentioned before, led a strong group of young players that included James Cobbin, Bill Canagata, Reggie Howard, and James Portier. While the veterans on the team included Verdez Drake, Art Hamilton, Carl Forney, Mal Murray, Prince Joe Henry, Taylor Smith, and Sam Allen's friend and high school teammate, Walt Lundy. Walt played shortstop during the 1957 season for the Clowns and Black Yankees. He signed with the Negro American League's Detroit Clowns the following season and showed his positional versatility by patrolling the outfield. Now, the Detroit Clowns were a completely different team than the Indianapolis Clowns, and they were actually only known as the Detroit Clowns for that one season in 1958. That franchise was more commonly known as the Detroit Stars. After his stint with Detroit ended, Walt Lundy came back home where he played until 1970 for the Norfolk Tigers and Norfolk Wildcats, two independent teams. Walt was inducted into the Hampton Roads African American Sports Hall of Fame in 2002 before passing away on June 18, 2005. Thankfully, when the Norfolk Tide celebrated Sam Allen on July 18, 2004, Claude Cousins and Walt Lundy were both there to celebrate with him. Don't forget, it's a huge help when you guys rate and review the show on whatever platform you choose to listen. 5-star ratings help our podcast get shown on more people's suggested podcast pages, which means more people will hear our show. It just takes a couple seconds of your time, but it really helps us a lot. And of course, liking us on social media, interacting with our posts, and sharing things with your friends is great too. No matter how you choose to support us, even if it's just by listening, we appreciate you being here. Until next time, I'm Dan Wallach, and this is My Baseball History.